Rachel.
Okay, we're good.
Fantastic. Good evening. Today is April 28th at 6:30 in the evening.
Recording in progress.
We'll start over. That's all right. Good evening. It's 6:30 in the evening on April 28th, 2021, and this is a meeting of the Finance and Facilities Committee, Subcommittee. We have at least one member attending remotely. Hello, Mr. Manzo. Thank you for being here. And I expected Todd Rotundo to be here remotely. So maybe my helper is going to check on that. We have a very packed meeting this evening. We're allowed to meet remotely, thanks to the governor. I'm not reading that thing. We're like hustling along here. So as soon as I get into the Zoom, I will share the agenda. The first item on the agenda is to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting. I would be looking for a motion for that.
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Karen. Thank you, Kim. Any comments, corrections? Mr. Manzo, this is where you always shine. Okay, all right, hearing none, there's a motion on the table. We're going to do a roll call vote because we have somebody remote. Mr. Manzo?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Ms. Coelho?
Yes.
Myself, yes, that passes 4-0. All right, the next item on our agenda is a Buildings and Grounds report from Mr. Collins, including some additional information that I sent along. Does anybody have any questions on the B&G report or on the additional items that were sent separate from the packet? Okay, Mr. Kim, is there a problem in the control room? Okay, thank you. All right, I just want to quickly say that one of the things in the additional questions we sent to Mr. Collins had to do with the pesticides used on the fields. Some people have been concerned about that, especially where our children are now sitting on the ground outdoors sometimes to eat. So Mr. Collins reported that we don't use any pesticides on our fields, and that answer is now going to be included with all of the other items from this meeting. So if somebody wanted to actually read the questions and read the answers, they can do that. Okay, the next item, and we don't have to vote to accept that. The next item is the presentation. Okay, so really I have to get in the meeting. Oh, here I come. I can't talk and search my email for the invite at the same time. Here we go. Zoom, here I come. Oh, the host will let me in Zoom. Oh, fantastic. I am not going to join with audio, correct? Okay. No, I don't want to join with audio. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I only have one screen. We're gonna get some stuff out of the way, and we're gonna go open Jean's file. Hold, please. The revenue report.
Starts with admin updates.
Oh, thank you. God bless you. Okay, here we go.
Okay. Thank you. So the overview of what we're going to be discussing at this evening's meeting is going to be food service update from Christina Leal, the end of year audit, report audit, and the financial, FY21 financial reports. And I'm going to give the floor to Christina.
All right. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I just want to go over food service, where we are, where we've been, and answer any questions. So the first slide you can see is a recent Census Bureau household report that Desi had put out. And as you can see, I circled Massachusetts, and it shows how household communities have gotten food during the pandemic. And the blue line is schools and school support programs. So as you can see, Massachusetts is the only state in New England that has over 50% of all food was reported by providing school community organizations. So we are really excited that we stepped up and provided food to our community throughout the state. So on the next one, you can see, so it's been a little over 13 months since the start of the pandemic, and we have served over 480,000 meals to the students in Beverly. We've explored many different options of how we can get food out to the community. We do daily meal pickups, we do weekly meal pickups, we provide weekend meals, home deliveries, feeding the kids in school, and we provided meals during all vacations, summer, winter break, February, and then most recently April. So to celebrate, National School Lunch Hero Day is a national celebration that they do every year. This year it falls on Friday, May 7th. So we will be celebrating our school lunch heroes. I will be sending out an email to the principals. I have little prizes and bags for all of them to celebrate their day, to show the appreciation and dedication that they have had to feeding the children of Beverly. So if you are in the schools or see them on Friday, May 7th, please give them a thank you for all their hard work. I will be posting that as well on the Instagram. So with the return of in-school learning, in-person learning, we have changed our model at the elementary schools and middle schools. All the students are still receiving a bag lunch daily. It does have a hot sandwich, so it's easy to eat. Each school has a different plan that works best for their schools. And breakfast is available for each child as they leave at the end of the day. It is a shelf-stable breakfast so that they can eat it at home, so there's no breakfast in the schools unless a child is hungry, needs to eat. We obviously would provide that. Wednesday, as the half a day, continues to be a grab-and-go breakfast and lunch, so they just take their lunch and breakfast to go like we were doing before in school learning for everybody. And our first week's counts have dropped a little bit, but they are continuing to increase each day, and hoping that students continue to take advantage of the lunch program. At the high school currently, with the dismissal at 12 o'clock, we do provide a bag lunch and breakfast. So they're taking home their hot lunch, they're eating it, and they have breakfast for the next day. For the cohort that's not there the following day, there's also a cold entree for them to take home if they wish for the next day as well. Once they get in person, we will be adjusting the schedule, obviously, because they won't be leaving at 12. We're still working out the details on what that looks like. I'm working with Betty and Mark to figure out what the best option for serving. Very similar to the elementary schools, we will be doing breakfast on their way out so they can eat breakfast at home the next day.
I have a question on the slide before I scroll.
Sure.
So for the cohort that's not there, not going to be there the next day, they can take one food home, or can they take two?
So they can take the hot lunch that we have, and then we have a separate area that has a cold lunch that they could heat up at home. and a breakfast in that as well. So they're not getting 2 hot sandwiches, they're getting one that's clearly like for the next day.
Okay, so they get breakfast for the next day and lunch for the next day, but they don't get breakfast for the day that they'll come back.
No, they do. So each bag will have a breakfast and a lunch. The difference is one lunch is
Hot.
hot
one's
and the
cold.
other one's
Okay,
not.
fantastic, thank you.
You're welcome. So RLA families and home deliveries with all students back in person except for our RLA families in the one cohort. We had eliminated the daily pickups at the high school. We currently have 25 families that get weekly pickups. It's a total of 52 students. They come every Wednesday and they pick up a whole week's worth of food, 7 days, 7 breakfasts and 7 lunches for each family. It's up 10 families from a month ago when we started it. So it definitely, word has gotten out and hopefully it continues to increase. We currently have 9 families that we do home deliveries to. And we have that with volunteers through the community, and we've been doing that since the fall now. And we will continue to do that until June 19th, which is the last day of school. June 18th, I'm sorry. Don't want to make us go an extra day. So weekend Wednesdays is something that we just started with once we all went back at the high school, or the middle school rather. And so we have been serving an average of about 200 students for weekend meals that come to pick up the meals. So every Wednesday for early release day, we brought families to come pick up their meals for the weekends because it was the early release day. So we were doing it the 12:30 to 1:30. April 14th was the first weekend we did it. We did provide over 50 students meals for that, so we were happy with that. When the high school does return, we are going to have to adjust that time because the students will be eating. So we're still working on the details, but it's going to be between 3 and 4 on those Wednesdays. We'll be giving out the RLA meals as well as the weekend Wednesday meals. Community partners, we partner with Beverly Bootstrap since the start of the pandemic in March, donating any excess foods from our kitchens. When we shut down, we had a ton of produce, a ton of fresh dairy, and so we did donate that to Bootstraps. And most recently, over April vacation, we found we had a significant amount of produce and milk again because we weren't quite sure what the middle school numbers were going to look, and we obviously erred on the side of caution. So we were able to donate a lot to Beverly Bootstraps. And since September, Beverly Bootstraps has been donating 120 snack bags to us, and we send them out. They used to send them out to the elementary schools for the weekend snacks. We now distribute them at the high school for the RLA families, anyone that comes to pick up on weekend Wednesdays. And that's a picture of what is in the snack bags. So the USDA waivers, I'm sure most everyone heard that the USDA recently extended several waivers until June 30th of 2022. So all next school year, students will be free. The waivers will allow for a seamless transition into summer as well as the following school year. Parents will be able to pick up meals for students, and they can pick up multiple days worth. We will be able to do weekend meals as well as school vacation meals again next year. I'm working right now with the park department to determine the best parks to distribute meals at over the summer. Since we do not have to follow a census, we can go anywhere that the kids are. In the past, we haven't been able to go to the most popular parks, but I am working with the Beverly Rec Department to be able to make sure we are out in the community where the kids are. We have the literacy program running at Hannah starting July 5th, and several schools are planning to have a 2-week summer session, and we'll be able to provide breakfast and lunch to all those locations, as well as summer school classes that will take place at the high school and the middle school. So I'm working with all the school principals to determine their needs and when time they'll be here over the summer. Yes.
All right, so I have a question on this slide
Sure.
too. So this is for all children as opposed to for our children who were getting free and loot. Like 2 years ago when we did a summer program,
Yep.
we were only feeding a subset of our children.
We had to follow the census. So if the census wasn't in a free or reduced parameter, then we could not. Or we had to have a list that showed 50% or more were free or reduced. But now that doesn't exist this year.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Like you want, Mr. Rotundo, do you have a question? Or just that we're recognizing that you're in the meeting?
Nope, I actually do. Counselor Flowers had asked me to ask a couple of questions specifically about this presentation, and I agreed to absolutely do it. And this is one of the questions that she was asking. I know right now the federal government from the slide is extending the program, and this is a question she's asking, is that after the 2022, would there be consideration to continue the program? If not, is our community can make changes to our own systems to continue to be able to feed all students for free. So it sounds as if she's looking at right now where the USDA is giving the waivers to continue with free meals for last year and this year due to the pandemic. Once those waivers end, would that something be able to be consideration? And I think that would also probably lend to the business manager and something like that.
Right, so, I mean, as far as what the USDA is, if they're going to be extending it, that we do not know. I'm going to assume not, that it wouldn't be. And as far as us being able to provide lunches for free, I'm not sure what the regulations are on that, that I do not think that we'd be getting any kind of funding. Some communities, because of their low and reduced incomes families, they're a
CEP.
CEP program. We do not qualify for that. So
Right, so
it's
that,
something that we can find out. We're just actually we were very excited to hear that they went all the way till June of 22.
absolutely.
We found out this information in April. It was like, really? But there's different programs that the USDA has, and one is called, Christina can talk about the seamless summer, and the other one is different rates. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yep. So right now we operate under summer food service program. And then there's also seamless summer, which was for school districts that did not operate previous summer programs. So they were part of the National School Lunch Program, and then they had to operate over the summer. So that's when they transitioned into what they're calling seamless summer. As a summer food service program, or SFSP, I get reimbursed, we as Beverly get reimbursed at a higher rate. And so they're keeping that higher rate for all seamless summer. So the sounds of it, we will be transitioning into a seamless summer model come the fall. I'm still waiting for details, but we would be able to get the higher reimbursement rate.
Right, so I think if I interpret Mr. Rotundo's reading of Ms. Flowers' question, she's basically trying to say to us as a school district, would we incur these costs to keep this program going after June of 2022? Would we even entertain that idea? And that's why he pointed it at you.
Yes.
Jean,
I
you,
saw
the
that. He
business
said that.
manager.
Yes, I mean, I do not know the answer to that question. I mean,
Well, I think that we don't have the information, we would need information about what the cost of that program would be to run, so I wouldn't even begin to estimate. I do know that, we know that our reimbursement rate per meal is what?
For lunch, it's about $2.37, and then, or actually breakfast is $2.37, and lunch is a little over $4.
So that would be per meal. We right now get reimbursed for that, so you can assume, and that's for the families that, right now, they're saying everyone's eligible to get that reimbursement. We would have to do some digging to figure out how many would be eligible for that reimbursement, and then how many would the district be carrying? And so that would be, sort of what that investigation would look like. And I have no idea how to, I wouldn't even attempt to try to estimate what that cost would
But we're
be.
not going to sit here and say no. When that time comes, we will
We
have
certainly
those
would look into that. We certainly
conversations.
can present to the committee the information and
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 here's
what that cost
what
would
I'd
be.
really like to say back to my city councilor friends who posed that question, is that if we needed more money in our budget to do that, it is really in their hands to give us more money to do that. So, it's in our hands to ask for more money as well. But Mr. Rotundo, I believe you had more than one question?
I just would like to add just to that, that currently the food service budget in their revolving account is about $2 million. So that would be, if we're not receiving any payroll, any income from the federal government, it would be a 2 million plus. Because again, right now we have a 2 million and that's on what the average students that have been taking lunch. If you were to announce that everybody eats for free,
Right.
there
No,
could
no,
be an increase.
right, and
So it
I'm not
is-
thinking everybody eats for free for forever. I'm saying that our neediest families, when this program ends, and I believe that was the intent of Ms. Flowers, but I don't
Yeah,
know.
so just to
I-
clarify, it wouldn't end this is going to keep going for the low-income students.
Yeah.
This is, everyone gets to eat.
Oh, okay,
So
that's
for,
great.
for clarification purposes, just I want to put out there as Madam Chair is that I think Councilor Flowers was looking to see after the 2022 program where the federal government's picking the tab up for the 4,600 plus students, that would we be able to continue it? And there is costs to it. I don't think she asked that question, but obviously it's to kind of create the conversation to look into it. And we have a whole, 17, 16 months to, put in consideration. What does it look like? So I don't think she was completely looking for an answer for that right now, but where there was a presentation with the food service, I think it was an opportunity to impose that question out. But the second question she did ask, and I did miss it on the slide, and not that I missed it, but I figured it would be opportunity instead of me trying to get back into the chat, was her second question was, she knows that the kitchens of the public school systems are partnering with the bootstraps to get excess food into the hands of Beverly people who can use it. She is wondering what about unused wanted food from the meals during the school day, especially milks. Can those be captured across the schools to reduce waste and get them to the students and who do want and benefit from them? So I know Superintendent Chirochek, that conversation a few years ago was asked at one of the PTO president meetings, and I just want to know if the policy still stands. And I know the Board of Health had some hesitancy about it at the time, as well as maybe the food director at that time was fear of how it was going to be properly held, how it was going to be transported,
Yep.
and what have you. So I don't know if that's still in a
So that's an
policy.
ongoing, that's still an ongoing discussion. I know that the committee here discussed that a couple of weeks ago. I'm not sure if it was at Finance and Facilities or at the Committee of the Whole. However, in terms of the procedures and process for doing that, certainly COVID has played into causing some changes in regulations for how we handle food and what we can do and what we can't do. But I know that the school committee is investigating it. I know that at a couple of our individual schools, they're piloting some ideas about how to do that. And again, in terms of what Christina can do from her end, she's definitely sort of restricted by federal regulations around what she can and can't do with food. I don't want to answer for you, but.
No, that's absolutely correct, especially with the current model that we have as the SFSP. It's not an offer versus serve. So a child can't say he doesn't want the milk. We are required to give them that milk in order to get the reimbursement claim. One thing I do want to just tag into about is we still will have the applications available in July and encourage families to fill them out. They are extending the EBT cards. I'm not sure exactly what families will be eligible, but we are going to definitely encourage all families to fill out an application, even though it is free to all students, just in case there is a benefit that they would be able to get an EBT card.
So just for clarification purpose on my part, so when I send a report back to Council Flowers, it's sort of the share table, not so much that if the student refuses the milk, but if the student chooses to take the milk, now that the school's back in session, are they considering putting a share table out? Sort of is, I think, what Council Flowers was talking about. Everyone taking it, but not everyone always wanting what's in their bag regardless.
Yes, and that's a conversation that's the exact conversation that the school committee is having. Part of the challenge with that is that we are still applying safety mitigation strategies for all of our schools and for all of our employees, as well as I know that Christina has regulations around if the food's been served, can she take it back? And so right now, as regulations stand, the school district cannot the food service department cannot set that process up, but I do believe that there is some conversation at building levels for some schools to see if there are volunteer opportunities to get something going. We all hope that not only around share tables, but around some of our recycling efforts and our composting efforts that have been sort of put on hold over the past 18, 17 months. I don't know how many months it's been through the course of the pandemic, that we, as things sort of come back into less regulated around the safety mitigations, that we're able to kind of put some of those measures back in place and get some of those things going.
And I'll pile on and say that the action item in the last school committee meeting where we discussed share tables was to ask our wonderful business manager where is the policy that was being worked on with the food board of health guy, and it's budget season, so that's going to be in your report or not? No. Okay, right. So I asked it in a very generic way, specifically knowing that we're in budget season, and so maybe after we approve our budget and get out of budget season, we can pick that back up. I don't know that it's realistic to try to do it before the end of this school year, other than the pilots that Dr. Trocheck has mentioned. But it's on our radar screen for sure.
Thank you
Yes.
very much, everyone. I appreciate that.
And are you done, Mr. Rotundo?
I am, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Ms. Robinson?
Thank you. I'm certainly not looking for exact percentages here, but just curious, what is roughly the percentage of kids who are taking the lunches at the elementary, middle, and high school levels?
So at the elementary, it's was really high when they were leaving at 12 because we were there giving it to every child as they left the door. So we were, I would say, 90% of kids were taking it. Now that they are eating in school, the number has definitely dropped. It's more roughly between, don't know percentages, I could give you numbers per school. They range from like 130 at a school up to 250. So depending on the different schools, and I could definitely tell them, I know those as opposed to the percentage. And we're doing about 600 a day here at the middle school. So, and then lunch or breakfast for the next day are not as high, just because once again, we put it out there, but we are not there pushing the kids to take it. It is on a table, it is for them to take. So the numbers are higher at some schools and then at others, but they once again range between that 100 to 200 at the elementary schools and about 400 here.
So I've heard a lot about just the food being wasted sometimes, and we hate to hear that. Is there a way to just let the kids know what's in there every day? If it's a bagged lunch, they might not know what's in there, and they could just take it more often, or?
Yep, so for the lunches, we do have all the menus that are posted online. So the menus are posted actually through June, the end of the school year for lunch. So they are posted there. And then at the middle school and the high school, we do offer an option. So there's two options. So the students or the staff will tell the students what they have in each thing or each bag lunch. There is not an option currently at the elementary school just because we felt it would take too much time to distribute because it would be decision making. And so we just kind of took that out and just made it easier for this first month just to make sure it was smooth and easy.
And finally, just thank you for all you've done. I think it's kind of amazing what you've accomplished over the past 14 months.
Thank you.
Are you ready for the next thing?
So if that's all the questions for Christina,
She may run away.
she is going to get to her home, so she can be on for the next meeting.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ms. Leal.
Still on my financial, the administration update.
Yep.
I have just a couple of other, one or two slides.
This one or not this one?
Thanks. I didn't have my microphone on. What I did send out to the committee is a copy of the Powers and Sullivan auditing forms, has submitted the independent audit. So therefore, every year, our school end-of-year financial report needs to be audited by an outside agency. And they did find 4 findings in here that were able to be corrected through amendments. So we have submitted that, and they have sent it to the Department of Ed, that we are in compliance with the rules and regulations. And I also sent a copy to the city's finance and city auditor's office. So I did send that. In the past, I've given everybody these copies, and people really don't want them, so I sent them in the packet. And then the next slide is just, I will be reviewing the financial reports. And I do have some items that need to be approved, have a vote to approve.
Okay, what would you like to see first? The agenda says the revenues.
Yep, so we can do the revenue report.
Revenue report coming up. Oh, that's really small. Let me make it bigger. Hold on there. It's not so small on my screen. Here. Okay.
So the revenue report that is presented to you does show the data that's been processed through the Munis accounting system since April 16th. And as far as the school choice and circuit breaker revenue, that is coming in as on a quarterly or monthly basis through the Department of Revenue. And currently that is the amounts that we are anticipating is the amounts that the Department of Revenue is anticipating to give us. There is another report that's done that we should be receiving this quarter if there's going to be any kind of adjustments. The circuit breaker revenue report at the end of, I would say, April-May period, if there's going to be any adjustments, we'll see that. And what they do is they figure out communities can ask for circuit breaker relief if they have expenses that are 25% higher than the previous year, and after those have all been allocated out, if there's any extra funds, they tell us. So sometimes we don't hear about that until the end of May, early June. Transportation revolving, we do have some students that are paying, but most everybody that is being transported is not paying because we're only transporting. We're transporting very few that are in a fee distance from the school. So I do have $4,177 that we're anticipating that we may be able to collect. But if I am not able to collect that, then I will be able to receive those. I do have funds in the revolving account to cover that amount. Excuse me. The building rental fees, mainly that is what we're receiving from the YMCA. We're really not renting out our buildings to anybody other than them at this time. If we do have anything, I do see that we will be estimating that we will be receiving what we've anticipated.
Do you, as I shift my eyes across the room, have any even inklings of when we might open our rentals back up to our renting entities?
Well, it's funny that you asked today, because Dr. Shorchuk and I are always talking about the conversation. We did have a request most recently that is an educational request of having a camp at the end of June. And we are talking about that the first thing we need to do is develop something that they can sign, that we need to make sure that they're going to come. They're going to follow the rules and regulations of the CDC and the Massachusetts Governor's Office and any other monitoring agency that's going to come on board. So we are starting. So we have had a lot of requests still for people that want to use our auditorium for dance recitals, et cetera, like that. Right now, and sports. And right now we've been saying no to the sports because the gyms have been filled with excess furniture, and all of the other, can we do this? And one of the questions, Dr. Shortchuck and I was talking about is like, whose responsibility is that going to be? I'm over at McEwen, I have no idea how many people are in there. People fill out a form, who's going to police that? So we're planning on having a more in-depth conversation of that and when can that happen?
I think really we've come to the, we'd like to begin to open our rentals up and begin for the revenue stream coming in, but also for the community use that people want to use the facilities. And the one thing is just kind of figuring out what that disclaimer is around following the capacity limits, because, when we rent it out, we don't stand at the door and count how many people come in and any of that sort of thing. And so we would want to just make sure that we check that for liability purposes or for whatever, that we have a proper disclaimer on the rental form that says you need to follow these guidelines. And so that's sort of where we left it this
Right,
afternoon.
and the other thing would be the cleaning and, after somebody has rented, to make sure that we have sanitized for our students that are going to be entering the building.
Thank you.
So, now, stay tuned, it's happening, Then, next thing I have here is the preschool revolving, that is the preschool revolving, the fees for tuition for that. And the athletics, my anticipated was, forecasted was 209,748, which I've discussed each month, that's an amount that we pretty much historically have said and have targeted and met most of the time. I do plan to have a meeting with Mr. Keefe and Ms. Taylor in the next couple weeks to talk about, now that we're in the final season, where are we with it? I do anticipate that they're going to need some funding from me to help them offset what they weren't able to collect. And that's why I've invited Ms. Taylor to see what the high school can absorb of it before we have to dig into other cost centers. So I'm not worried about any of the any of the revenue sources that, if I am not going to get in the funds that I suspect may be shortfalls, I do have the funding elsewhere. We can review the expenditure report, or we can go to the items that need a vote and then do the expenditure report, your choice. So what we do need a vote for is the gifts to schools and the transfers.
Which transfer would you like first?
Transfer number 547.
Okay, it's on the screen.
So this transfer 547 is for $45,000. And we found that on the transportation, the special education transportation costs of not, that we had a little savings this year, and the mechanic needed a new pickup truck because the one we have right now is rusting and needs to be replaced. So therefore, this is transferring from the SP 375 to the NI 375. It's both transportation, but it cost centers of SP and NI. So I'm looking for approval of this transfer for $45,000.
I'll make that motion. We can make my own motions, right? I'm looking for a second.
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 Excellent. We'll all second it. Is there, anybody have any questions or comments? Mr. Manzo, I think I see your hand up.
Yeah, just a simple one, Gene. It should be said that the mechanic works on both vehicles that provides regular and special ed transportation, so it doesn't really matter where we pay for his truck from. Is that right?
Yes, generally speaking, we do the, for my end of year report, I only like to have under the special education would be the special education buses. So that's why I'm moving it to NI, because it is more of a non-instructional expense versus a special ed. When you do the end of year report, they do calculate what's in special education, so I wouldn't want this to be, thought as a special ed only.
Great. Thank you.
All right, so there's a motion on the table. In a second, we'll do a roll call. We'll start with you, Mr. Manzo.
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Coelho,
Yes.
myself, yes, that passes 4-0. Here comes the next one, Jean.
The next one should be number 548, I believe.
Yes, ma'am. It's on the screen.
Okay, and this is a transfer. I needed to make a transfer from different salary accounts for kindergarten salaries, and just, this is just moving money from two different schools to the Cove School, just to align the staffing pattern to the budget.
All right, I'm looking for a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Any questions on this one? All right, there's a motion on the table and a second. Roll call, Mr. Manzo,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Coelho,
Yes.
myself, yes. 4-0. Hold, please. Have to unannotate. Annotating causes us a delay. Maybe we can't afford that delay anymore. All right, Jean, the last one is on the screen.
The next transfer is number 557, and this was looking at the utility accounts, gas, electric, telephone, and heating. And this was aligning, we have forecasted out what the remainder of the year will be, and this was shifting monies from one school to another school based on what our needs are going to be. So this is really all utilities, but it does cross the cost centers, so I need approval.
All right, I'm looking for an approval. I'm looking for a
make that
motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Manzo. Second, Ms. Coelho. Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Any questions on this one? There's a gazillion of them in here.
Yes.
All right, there's a motion on the table. There's a second. Roll call, Mr. Manzo,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Coelho,
Yes.
myself, yes. That passes 4-0.
The next thing I have that needs approval would be the gifts to schools for the month of March.
We love gifts to schools.
We do.
Do you have any descriptions beyond the words that are on this page?
No, I do not have anything. This is funding that has come in from various sources. The largest one is the Benetivity Community Impact Fund that is going to the high school for general use, is what they state, for $7,400, and then some family donations. And then there's some commission from having the student pictures at Hannah School. The total is $10,600.
Looking for a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Any questions on the gifts to schools? There's a motion on the table to accept $10,600. Roll call vote, Mr. Manzo,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Coelho,
Yes.
myself, yes. Fantastic, because who would ever say no to free money?
That's right.
That passes 4-0. Ooh, gee, now are we back to expenses?
Now we're back to the expenditure report.
Okay, it is on the screen.
Okay, and I would see if there's anybody has any particular questions that they would like to ask.
Mr. Rotundo, I don't get to see you, so I'm going to call on you first. Do you have any questions about the expenditures report?
I do not right now. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, I'm looking around the room. Does anyone have any specific questions for Jean? For Ms. Sherburne? All right, and
So
Ms. Sherburne,
what I would like to, did you have any questions?
well, usually you tell us the areas that you're concerned about. So I was going to ask you if there are areas that you're concerned about.
Right. So generally speaking, what I'm doing at this time is, talking to each of the principals and the department heads to see if, what is there going to be for expenditures. So we want them to encumber the funds right now that they know of to see where our balances are and if we have any shortfalls. At this time, I'm not really particularly concerned about anything in any particular line. There's some accounts that I can see that there's, I believe, a little extra funding that's coming in. So, each year we have some people that are taking maternity leaves that are unpaid. We have excess funds. Some of the areas that I did see that there's a little surplus, I need to do a deep dive into the accounts that are offset, so some of them may be Title I and grants like that, to make sure that, we're making sure that we've charged enough to the grants and, not too much, et cetera. So that's what I'm working on right now. We're talking to the principals and department heads if there's things that they need. So if they were planning on using money for, say, professional development at this year, and there's not many conferences going on, to look at the other needs in their school so that we can help alleviate next year's budget if we can purchase some things this year. And we've asked them to do that, now until maybe the second week in May. So I do not want to be spending money on June 28th. I do want to be looking at it now. And we will look and see if there's any savings that we can put into the revolving accounts. Just make sure that, like the athletics, we know that's going to be a shortfall, so I have that. You don't see that in here because that's in the revolving account. I did notice on page
Oh, no, I stopped sharing.
34. It's OT 275, so it's going to be page 32. Under substitutes and long-term substitutes, I do see that is, there's $77,000 left between the two accounts. The long-term subs, those are people that we've hired for the remainder of the year. So that can be, eliminated quite quickly. So therefore, that's one area, if anywhere, that I'm watching that I may have to put some funds into. But I have to calculate that out. And then other than that, I do think that we had some savings in some areas, because of the leave of absences. As far as the unemployment is concerned, that was on page 34. We have only made payment for July and August, I believe it is. So I do think that 145 is going to be totally eaten up when we make the payments. They extended the payments until June 30th, so we're taking advantage of that. And I've actually been looking at that deep dive into those and to see what is actually fraudulent and what did we receive back. So we did have some staff members that it says they were paid out. And just in this last month that I received, I see the money, we got the money back. So whoever's investigating that is finding it and they're returning the funds. So I need to look at that for the whole year. But I do see that. Other than that, the SP 860 area, which is on near the end. On page 37, there is some funding available in there. And, that is something that if somebody all of a sudden goes out, so I do see some remainder funds in there. So if that can offset some of the other areas that we may be short. And then what I'll do is I'll be having a conversation with the superintendent on if we do have excess funds, what would we, what is the best thing for us? So as you know, we're going into FY22 budgeting, so therefore, if there's something that we could pay for legally out of this year's funding for next year, which there's very limited that you can do, but one would be tuition. You can pay it. I just have to report it on my end-of-year report as a prepayment. And that might be something that we might be able to do, but I'm not used to seeing, those $200 figures down there. So that is something that we will be looking at. Plus, I'll look and make sure the circuit breaker funding, we have spent just what we carried over. So that's about what I have for the expenditure reports. If anybody has any further questions, I can take them now.
Oh, I see Mr. Manzo's hand.
You're muted.
You're muted, Mr. Manzo.
The only other question I had for you, Gene, was the balance in the remote learning academy line. Do we think you're going to be able to recover any of that as more students come back to in-person learning?
Yeah, so the amount that you're talking about in the OT 075 account?
Page 31, yeah, page 31.
Page 31, yep. So we're not going to be recovering any of that because that would have been teachers that we hired for the year. So they're going to be
okay.
paying if they're going to be. So we have had some shifts in placement. So if we didn't need a third grade remote learning teacher, we've shifted into another area that may be covering somebody that's either a retired and or somebody that's out on a leave. But we wouldn't have any savings. And if we did have some savings, it would be that those people would be laid off and then they would, be able to go to unemployment. So it's more of a shift of duties versus funding.
Well, I notice that you've encumbered quite a bit of the salary money in that line, but not all of it. And so do you anticipate needing to expend all of the remaining balance of almost 700,000, or is everything
Yes,
been
yes,
encumbered
that's
for that?
actually not encumbered. There's actually nothing encumbered, so I do not encumber the
Oh, I'm
salary
sorry, I'm in
lines.
the wrong line.
Yep,
Yep,
yep.
I'm
So-
on the wrong line, sorry.
That's okay. But I am, and that's one area that I do need to look at just to make sure that I have, that we're going to be expending that amount. So if you see that one is at a 43%
So,
and salary lines are at 65. So I need to look at that to make sure that, and the thing is, some of them is that we had somebody that was being charged to another account and has been moved to that. So I do not forecast that anything will be remaining available in that particular line.
Thank you.
I went the wrong way with my mic. So if we have a couple of minutes left over, if anybody has any other questions for Jean, I am going to use probably 2 minutes to read one of the paragraphs from Mr. Collins' response that we blew past at the beginning of the meeting relative to pesticide use on our fields, on our school fields. Anybody
Yes.
have any questions for Jean? Or we're going to go backwards in our agenda and do this real quick. So this is a quote from Mr. Collins answering a question I had about the pesticides used on our fields, especially as our children sit outside now to consume their lunches. In general, a registered pesticide or herbicide cannot be used on school property when people are present. Most require 7 days of no activity, prior notification to the users, and significant signage. With these restrictions, it makes it virtually impossible to use a registered product on school property. You will note that most products listed in our plan, and the plan, there's a link in this email and it'll be available for people to reference. Both the products listed in our plan do not have an EPA registration number as they are natural products. We have found and used almost exclusively natural products on all our city properties. Natural does not mean without risk, so our main focus is on keeping the turf healthy so that it doesn't need intervention. This is done by frequent aeration and overseeding. This promotes deep root growth and chokes out less desirable grass species. The end result is a durable turf that can survive the summer heat and bounce back as soon as the cooler weather returns. Our fertilizers are primarily derived from chicken manure and fish byproducts. We find these products may not smell great, but they are effective sources of nutrients. Okay, and then there's some additional paragraphs, including one about the variant issue that's going on in the city and how some of our sports fields are kept even more beautiful. But the bottom line is we're not using pesticides. We should not be worried about our children sitting on the grass to eat their lunches. So I wanted I wanted people to hear that because I've had a decent number of questions about that. All right, so does anybody else have anything for this wonderful Finance and Facilities Subcommittee meeting? We are scheduled next to meet on Wednesday, May 19th. In between now and then, on May 12th, we have our budget hearing, which is kind of F and FE related, that one of the two Fs. Other than that, I'm going to call this meeting to a close, and we all have a little bit of break before we go into our next one. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, Mr. Kim from BevCam. Thank you, my helper over there. We're going to leave the meeting.
Your mic on?
It is now. Welcome, everyone. It's 7:31 p.m. Today is Wednesday, April 28th, 2021. We are present at the Beverly Middle School in its library. Our meeting is in a hybrid model today, using a remote meeting application provided at no cost to our district with captioning. BevCam is broadcasting us tonight, allowing for public access to the open portions of this meeting. And this is all allowed under the Governor's March 12th, 2020 order entitled Order Suspending Certain Provisions of Open Meeting Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20. This order specifically suspends the need for a quorum in the chair to physically be present and asks for our body to use technical methods to allow safe public access. We would encourage viewers to utilize BevCam streaming options this evening if possible. Tonight is a committee of the whole. Let me just admit a couple more people here. Tonight is a committee of the whole, and as such, we do not have any agenda items for addressing the body this evening. However, our next opportunities to address the body will be on May 12th, 2021. First, we will have a public hearing related to our FY22 budget at 6:30 p.m. and a regular school committee meeting at 7 p.m. Both of those, again, are on May 12th. You may send your requests in advance to citizenconcerns@beverlyschools.org to receive a link to those meetings, to either meeting. And please remember, remarks should be limited to approximately 3 minutes. Joining us today are members of the school committee. We're actually all physically present. And we have a number of additional members joining us, various members of the district administration and leadership teams, and other participants related to tonight's agenda. I will conduct a full roll call attendance in a moment for the record, since the meeting application sometimes does not display all participant names or affiliations. Please do remember that any audio or video that you supply on this platform will become part of the meeting record, and as such, you should use your mute functionality to prevent background noises. The chair will call to remind you to unmute when you are recognized. Okay, members, I would now like to conduct a roll call confirmation. Let's see. We'll start with Dr. Ken Ann McKenzie.
Here.
And Ms. Karen Robinson.
Here.
Ms. Kimberly Coelho.
Here.
Ms. Lorinda Visnick.
Here.
Mr. John Malady.
Here.
Dr. Suzanne Juracek.
Here.
Mayor Michael Cahill.
Here.
Ms. Jean Sherburne.
Here.
Ms. Liz Curran. Here. And I am Rachel Abel. We are also joined in person by Principal, did I get Mr. Malady? I did, I thought so, okay. Principal Betty Taylor is present, Dr. Andre Morgan, Ms. Bethany Splansky, and Dr. Dorothy Flaherty. And there's a poll, let me know if I'm missing anyone else in person. Okay, for our remote participants this evening, we have Mr. Brian Ailes, the City Finance Director, Mr. Dan Voss, an invited guest for our agenda from our RFP, solar RFP. We have Mr. Dana Krushank, who is our Transportation Director. We have Ms. Irina Keefe, our City of Beverly Sustainability Coordinator. We have Ms. June Casey's, our Nurse Leader. Mr. Mark Thomas, our Assistant Principal at the high school. And the last two participants are also here in person. They're just watching along online as well. Okay, with that, our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. And Ms. Visnick, I can't remember when I last called on you, so you're on the spot to lead us, please.
My honor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Visnick. Next order of business is to approve our meeting records from our last committee of the whole meeting, which was on March 24th, 2021. Do I have a motion to approve those records?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Visnick, and a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Were there any edits or corrections that we needed to make to this meeting record? Okay, thank you very much. I think they're very thorough. Thank you so much. We can just do a hand vote. All those in favor of approving the records? That would be 7-0. Okay, cruising right along, the school committee chair updates. It is my pleasure to invite Mr. Dan Voss from Kearsarge Energy and Arena Key from our sustainability office to present an update to the committee on what's been going on with the solar project. So, Mr. Voss, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Abel. Great to be here. Thanks for hosting me again. It was almost this very day last year that we last caught up. So tonight I'll present just a couple of slides to bring you up to speed with what's happened in the last 12 months and act as a little bit of a refresher for folks that may have been new to the board or new to the committee since the last presentation. So I'll just share my screen here. Okay, share screen one. Share. Let me know if you can see that. Is that coming through?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, great. All righty. So recap, as I mentioned, the last full meeting was last year on April 29th. We have been busy since then. Between Q2 and Q4 of last year, we were working hard to complete the national grid studies. If you recall, we had anticipated being ready for construction by summer of last year. However, the national grid, the utility process, moved us into a more detailed study that delayed us through to the end of last year. Actually, I should say that it says Q4 2021. That should have been Q4 2020. So first quarter of this year, we restarted the process, if you like, of permitting at the city level, having gotten through the majority of the national grid work. We held a stakeholder update on April 8th of this year with the school committee staff in participation, along with Chair Abel. With school staff and Chair Abel. And then we moved into a planning board meeting just last week where we received approval from the planning board for the designs that are largely identical to the designs that we looked at this time last year. So tonight's objectives, just a refresher. As I said, a bit of a progress update. I've just given that. Have a quick discussion about schedule. I thought we'd just revisit some of the frequently asked questions, or specifically the questions that the committee had looked to have answered last year, and then talk about next steps. How does that sound?
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So, quick update. This is a citywide program. We were the successful bidders in an RFP back in 2019 to develop solar across the city. So we are looking at a number of sites, two of which are the high school and the middle school, and hence the meeting tonight, of about 3.5 megawatts AC. About 3 megawatts of that is between the high school and the middle school. I won't go through line by line here, but one interesting metric or useful metric to think about is the number of houses that this system would power and the CO2 offset. So in broad strokes, using an EPA website that's available, the systems we're talking about across the city would be sufficient to power about 652 homes and offset almost 4,000 tons per year of CO2. That's equivalent, if you like, to the sequestration of almost 4,400 acres of trees. So it's a significant dent from a CO2 standpoint. So let's just talk quickly about the designs, and specifically, I just want to call your attention to the small changes since last year. So on the left of the screen, you can see the design that was presented to the board on April 29th of last year. On the right of the screen, you can see the design that was just approved by planning board. I've noted below the small adjustments that have been made between the two. Principally, last year we had the battery storage system located at the far end, the western end of the bus parking lot. After discussing with facilities the location of that and thinking about the need to maximize parking in that area, we have moved the battery storage preferred location to still in the vicinity of the parking lot, but just on the back, if you like, of the parking bays. So it's circled and it's indicated with the number 1. So that's the preferred storage location. In discussion with various folks in the city, it was desired that we look at a couple of alternative locations so that there were options, and that's principally so that when we got planning board approval, we could get these options approved as well and then select the best of the 3. So indicated with number 2 are 2 areas that were identified for possible alternative battery locations. All right. But I should emphasize location 1 is our preferred site. And then finally, the third piece of activity, if you like, that occurred between last year and this is the validation that the fire access lanes and would be unimpeded by the array. And we in fact got emergency vehicles out on site, threw up ladders to ensure that in this location number 3, that there would be unimpeded access for the emergency services, and the chief was very satisfied with the outcome. So that is 502 Cabot. I can throw these plans up in greater detail if folks want to look at them in more detail, but I was going to just move on to 100 Sawyer and then take questions at the end if that works. So 100 Sawyer, once again, I've shaded in red the areas that change. So the location of the canopy, the rooftop, and the ground mount are still the same as they were last year when we presented. What has changed, or what was being updated, is in the ground mount area. We had a battery storage system located. You can see it indicated. It's a little red box on the southwestern side of that ground mount. The ground mount is the blue array that you can see there. When we went through this design with facilities and with fire and talked about the practical access points, what was decided was that we would move that preferred location, or if you like, the sort of ground mount location, if you like, of the storage up to the north. So indicated as point number 1 is where we've moved that battery storage location within the fence line of the ground mount. Okay. Once again, we looked at some alternative storage locations and alternative equipment locations. So number 2, you can see on the western side, right next to the tennis courts, where there is currently a storage area, we've identified an alternative battery location there. The reason for that is it's a lot closer to the interconnection. It's a lot more easily accessible by emergency services. And the other small red dot labeled as number 2, right next to the array, we simply moved some equipment from one grass island, 40 feet to the north to the next grass island. So very, very small change there. Point number 3, we had identified in the old array a row of panels that we were going to preserve. And speaking with the team that's focused on the historical nature of the system, we adjusted that and we selected a different row to preserve. So that it's a small change, but I want to point it out. So number 3 indicates the row of panels that we would be preserving from the old array. And finally, number 4, through this National Grid process, National Grid completed their design for the point at which we interconnect to their system. So last year, as now, we're connecting down in the southwest corner of the campus. But what National Grid did was they finalized their design, and what they'll be doing is placing poles just along the sidewalk there to act as the metering points for the solar arrays. So it's a small change. Originally we had pad mounted equipment. Now it'll be pole mounted equipment, but it's pole mounted equipment in an area where there were existing power poles, and it's completely out of the way. So that's the handful of adjustments since last year, but you know, effectively the arrays are identical in terms of their location and their size. Let me just touch on the schedule. So the National Grid timeline really drives the schedule for these projects, and the reason for that is that they have some upgrade work that needs to be done, and so the timing of our project will be timed to end at the point at which they end their work. So we are waiting right now for National Grid to give us their schedule. We would expect that to be issued to us. That they're going to issue one set of documents to us hopefully next week, and then within 2 weeks we'd have the schedule in hand, so we'll know then the timeline. But because of the stage of the year that we're at right now, and the fact that we're just getting the schedule from National Grid, we expect that, you know, the completion of the arrays, particularly the parking arrays at 100 Sawyer and 502 Cabot, will be in 2022. We may start some work in 2021 to ensure that we're going to, you know, we minimize disruption. We might take advantage of some vacation periods if we can, but the bulk of the work will be in 2022, we expect, given the time of year we're at right now. Okay. Let me just touch on these frequently asked questions. I'll race through them because I know we've talked through them before. I think we've touched on what the arrays look like. As I just mentioned, the arrays during operations will not interfere with daily ops or emergency vehicles. They are being built. The canopies are being built to a height of 13.5 feet at their lowest point, so all vehicles will be able to pass underneath them. It will not reduce parking spaces, and now we can say that even in the bus parking area, we will not be impacting any spaces given we've moved that battery storage location. It does not generate glare, and it has a minimal noise footprint. It's imperceptible once you get just a couple of meters away from the array. It's a little fan that sits in the inverter. The batteries will have an air conditioning system associated with them, so that gives you a sense of the level of noise associated with the battery systems. It would just be a typical kind of air conditioning system associated with that. Disruption during construction. Yeah, our principal focus in working with the committee and working with the principals of the schools and with the city will be to minimize disruption. There will clearly be construction going on in the car parks, but we're going to work very closely to ensure that the daily operations are minimally impacted, and so we'll look to do certain work during vacations if we can at 502 Cabot because of the very tight parking situation there, and we've previously discussed strategies for 100 Sawyer. Hazardous materials or components, the panels, the solar system is basically glass and copper, aluminium or aluminum, so nothing hazardous there. The batteries are lithium ion, so they're a battery that you'd all be familiar with, and there's no liquid involved with the batteries, it's all solid. Will be dark under the canopies. Any lights or cameras that need to be relocated will be relocated as part of this project in coordination with the city. And I mentioned the canopy height, 13.5 feet at the lowest level. Starting at that height, it means that the back edge will be higher than that. So if we start at 13.5 feet, the back edge may be approaching 18 to 20 feet with the canopies in the car park. Clearance, that is. The total height of the canopies is about 3 feet higher than that when you look at where the panels sit. And in terms of the students' use of the system for educational purposes, as part of the RFP, and regardless, as part of every project we do, we coordinate with the hosts to ensure that they're left with educational materials packages that can be used after the array is in place. We We have monitoring systems that are accessible. We provide logins to those monitoring systems so the school can track the energy and work on that with the students. And in fact, we're working with Norfolk County Ag School, which has an outstanding solar curriculum, and they have volunteered to walk any educators through that program and share that with them as well. So that's a great resource that we can now offer up as part of our project. This is just a snapshot of the long span design. It's basically like a carport with posts across which a beam is suspended, and then the panels sit on top of the posts. And here are some photos of that, as you can see. Next steps. So the next step is to finalize the National Grid schedule and pricing. The pricing is critical. The cost of the interconnection of these systems was significantly higher than had been originally expected, in part because of the amount of solar that has gone into the system, but some 700,000 or so higher than what was expected. So we are keen to see that final price come through from National Grid. We need to complete then the lease and the power purchase agreement, which I know will then come to this committee, the lease. Then in the meantime, we're looking at a program of test drilling, finalizing the engineering design, and then nailing down the schedule of work that we described, or I described a little bit earlier. So we would be working on that schedule and access plan. So that is what I had pulled together just to present. I'm mindful of time, so I guess I'll pass it back, Chair, to yourself and to the committee for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Voss. Ms. Keefe, I didn't know if you had anything that you wanted to add. We do have at least one hand here from the committee for questions.
Yeah, I do. So thank you very much, Dan, and hello to anyone from the school committee who I haven't had the chance to meet yet. I just want to add that about 2 hours ago, we received in our hands the full draft of our climate action plan, Resilient Together. And one of our primary energy goals in that plan is for our municipal operations to rely 100% on clean energy by 2030. And this project takes us a good chunk of the way there, covering about half of our electricity usage via these on-bill credits, while contributing clean energy into our local grid. So we're really excited about it. And I just want to add on to that final FAQ that Dan had mentioned about educational opportunities. One of the action items in our plan is to incorporate clean energy education into the school curriculum. And we have begun coordinating with Changes Simple about how we can build those learning opportunities into the project, both during its development and also as a lasting lesson that can be shared with our Beverly Middle School and high school students for years to come. And we have a special opportunity now to be able to contrast these new kind of photovoltaic technologies with the historic solar panels that Dan had mentioned previously. So we're very excited about it. Thanks.
Thank you so much for those updates. Okay, committee members, I think Ms. Visnick, you had a question?
I have a series of questions.
Okay.
The first one is, all right, what's our guest's name? Mr.
Voss. Yeah, and
Mr. Voss, you mentioned relative to the educational component, there is a kiosk in our high school already that was displaying what was coming off of the field. Are there plans for additional kiosks, or can that kiosk be reused once the work at 100 Sawyer Road is complete?
Yeah, so the great news is with these systems, all that is needed is internet access. So we can work with the city. I'm not sure what is in that kiosk right now, but we'll be providing that internet, that access to our tracking system, so that the screens that show production and different other different metrics during the day, that information can be projected onto screens either at desks or on monitors on the wall, or anything with an internet connection.
Fantastic. Can I keep going? All right. Thank you. Also related to the education, can you speak more to which row is being preserved? Is that row of panels, the historic panels, are they going to be very easily accessible and viewable, or are they kind of buried inside a couple of rows?
Yeah, let me pull up the slightly bigger plan so I can show you. Okay. Okay. All right, hang on. I just need to move that out of the way. All right, great. So you can see underneath the drawing here the existing rows. Okay. So what we discussed with the team was maintaining this row here. So, well, you can see the row right here. So we'll probably just turn it around so it's a little bit squarer. But this is the row that we would maintain, and here are the steps that go up. And so it won't be buried within the array. It'll be right up here on the front, and it'll be visible from the top of this staircase. And so we've been speaking with the folks from Fred and folks from Solar now about how to provide access to this visual access. That the issue with going inside the array with the modern systems that we're using, well, even with the old ones, but certainly with these systems, very high voltages. So we can't have folks kind of walking around inside the fence without someone from Kearsarge there. But that's why we selected this panel right up front so that it can be easily seen from the top of the steps.
Great, fantastic. My next question on this site is about moving. You said they're going to move something into the back, what I would call, if we call this historic panel the front, you're going to move something to the back.
Right.
And
So we had there was a battery that was positioned here as part of this project. So there's storage that is being built, a battery storage system that's being built along with these arrays. And it was positioned, right here. And you can see there's a decent slope here. And also it needs to be accessible by fire implements. So it's just a safety precaution, when it comes to batteries. And so we've moved it from down south up to the top here. So it'll sit, still within the fenced area, but to the north of the array in this area here. And it'll be right, very adjacent to the existing access road. So we'll have to extend the existing access road a little bit. But it meant we wouldn't have to, create more impervious surface by building a new access road. And it makes use of an existing entry.
fantastic. I don't know, is that land on that edge? I'm looking at you, Mr. Mayor. Are there neighbors back there? Are there any abutters to that edge?
You mean the edge to the left of the screen?
The edge where he's going to extend the access road and put the battery back there?
Yeah, I mean, the abutter is that commercial building that I think the pediatric practice is in.
Okay.
Does that sound right?
Well,
I
there's
think that's
not a
what it is.
residential abutters
No
there
residential,
for that
no.
to impact. Fantastic. All right, and my last related pair of questions. We have for a long time said that we need work, and Mr. Mayor, maybe this question is for you, we need work done to our parking lot to be able to get the existing panels to quote-unquote work, to be able to pull the energy and convert the energy off the existing panels. And so is that work now not going to be done or not going to be need to be done because of the new array? Or is it still going to have to use the infrastructure that is underneath that parking lot?
Right. So, oh, sorry. Would you like me to answer that, Mr. Mayor? Or?
No, I think I'd be stumped, so I'd be grateful if you answer it, Dan.
No worries. So, so you can see that there is work that we are going to be doing to bring the electricity from this new array down the road. It's this PE line. So we'll be burying this underground down to this area where it will interconnect. So we will do that. There is an existing underground conduit that runs from the old inverter house just here all the way along this road. It was put in place in 2010, and it runs to the interconnection point. We're not going to have to disturb that, so that will stay in place. In fact, we'll use it if we can. But to answer your question, we will be doing work to bury the power line that will bring the energy from that array down to the interconnection point here, which is basically between Russell and Kittredge Street.
Okay, fantastic. So then my last question really is for you, Mr. Mayor. It is my understanding that for years we have had funds encumbered to do that parking lot work. And now if we're not going to do that parking lot work, how do we go as a city about unencumbering those funds?
I'm going to have to look into that. But let's look into it together, because I can't answer you. I'm not familiar with encumbered funds on that point. So yeah, we'll look into it after tonight together.
I'm all set, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking around the room to see if other school committee members have any questions for Mr. Voss or Ms. Keefe. I thank you so much for your time. Thank you for updating us, and nice to meet you, Ms. Keefe. I'm sure we'll have future conversations with the committee and yourself. I think we're good. You're welcome to stay on if you'd like to watch the rest of our enticing meeting agenda, or you're welcome to drop off if you have some better things to do tonight. Thank you so much.
Right,
Thank you very much.
Chair
We'll leave you
Abel.
to it.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. Thank you to the committee. Look forward to building this with you. Cheers.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Rena.
Night.
Bye-bye.
Okay, for our next item, I just wanted to report out, I'm not sure, they did not have the attendees list visible for Day on the Hill that MASC hosted on Friday, April 16th. So I just wanted to report back to the committee that this year was a virtual Day on the Hill. This is MASC's annual legislative advocacy day. Typically, hundreds of people are able to go into the city and meet with, so it's committee members, superintendents, student leaders, go into the State House and meet with the executive and legislative leadership, as well as some local senators and representatives. However, this year was virtual, which afforded a lot of great opportunities, one of which is that they recorded the entire session, and it is available on the masc.org website if any of this sounds interesting to you and you want to watch the replay. So it was from 9 until about noon, and we had the distinct pleasure to hear from a number of speakers, including Senator Jason Lewis, Representative Jake Oliveira, Representative Carol Doherty, and Representative Alice Page. A lot of the focus of the discussion was about the MASC priorities as well as the legislative priorities. MASC has actually created a specific two-pager. I would encourage each of you, if you would, just take a moment to see how MASC is aligning its efforts with local school committees, to see if it aligns with our values and priorities here in Beverly, so we can work together. And also the legislative priorities were outlined, and that is in a slide deck that you can view the slides, if not the whole presentation. So I just wanted to point out that those resources are available, and since it was virtual, it was recorded. So if you hadn't had an opportunity, you should have all received some additional mail from MASC and start to see some of the different activities. We should definitely take full advantage of our membership with that group. The next item on our agenda was just to go over some upcoming meetings and reminders. Our next meeting will be of curriculum instruction and student life. That will be next Wednesday. And it will be followed on Thursday with a negotiation subcommittee meeting where we will begin our IBB or interest-based bargaining training sessions with our units A, B, and C. That will be hosted here in the middle school library. So our negotiating subcommittee will be meeting with our teachers union. We also have our public hearing and regular school committee meeting on May 12th. As I had mentioned at the start of the meeting, our public hearing is scheduled at 6:30, and our regular school committee meeting is scheduled for 7. As per usual, if we have a number of speakers for the public hearing, we will have a brief recess in our public hearing. We'll start our regular school committee meeting and recess to go back to those speakers. If you hear from any constituents that are interested in speaking, I would encourage you to share the citizen concerns at beverlyschools.org email address in advance so I can make sure links are provided. And we can discuss whether it makes sense to have any public access here for people that maybe are not as comfortable speaking on an electronic platform. I think we can make accommodations if we know in advance to have a podium available here as well. So then typically we have facility and finance the next Wednesday. And I want to remind you all that we discussed possibly moving our committee of the whole meeting up. We'll discuss that at the end of this evening's presentations to settle on a date for our next committee of the whole meeting, because waiting until the fourth Wednesday might be too late in order for us to vote on the budget. So please do remember to take a peek at your calendar as we end this meeting tonight, because we will be picking a date for our next committee of the whole. And perhaps that will replace our regular committee of the whole, depending on what agenda items we have. I think that covers it from the chair, and I would invite the superintendent to do her reports. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to share my report. I think some of my items are out of order on the agenda, so but we will circle back to each of them as we go. What I have here for us to take a look at today, first I will give some updates regarding reopening and regarding COVID, as I have been keeping you informed around the metrics. Some information about close contact tracing for classes in the bus, some information and update on transportation. I have a budget update, some adjustments to the draft that I presented to you 2 weeks ago, and some follow-up on some questions that were asked by the committee coming out of last meeting, some information on class sizes at the elementary, and some information regarding therapist staffing across the district. And then finally, I have some information about the high school full in-person instruction, and we'll end with a quick update on MCAS. So first, as we go forward, okay. Not sure why I'm not moving here. There we go. An update on the 7-day data. I've been tracking 4 weeks at a time for the 7-day data as it's released. We had 2 weeks since we last met. There were 68 cases identified in the week of April 11th, with a 23.65 average incidence, and 71 cases in the week of April 18th. However, the Board of Health reported that 27 of those 71 cases were from Endicott. So we actually are seeing somewhat of a stabilized incidence rate. Quick update on our surveillance testing. We're continuing to do our voluntary surveillance testing for all students and staff weekly. That's Thursdays from 11 to 4 at Beverly High School. And we are continuing our pool testing for students at the high school, and we'll be implementing some pool testing at the middle school in the coming week. I know that June and Miss Oliver have been, June Cases, our nurse leader, and Lisa Oliver, our principal at the middle school, have been working on getting that set up for families. I have an update on transportation. So currently, we have scaled our routes out to 1.6 miles. If you remember, we began at a 2.0 mandated riders only, and we've been adding riders as availability has come regarding different routes. On Monday the 3rd, we're going to begin 2 new runs, which are actual runs that have been added in the last week, both covering the downtown area to the middle school and to the Cove School. And then on May 10th, we're going to open another additional run from downtown area to the high school. So as you know, we're asking for our parents to continue the application process. We're identifying seats that are available on runs that are going. And so, you know, that link is available on the website, and we would encourage you to continue to apply if you're interested in transportation. In terms of our preparations for summer, this is a time that gets very busy. We're thinking about the different bus runs that we will need to provide over the summer. Beginning with our summer school runs for our regularly scheduled extended year program and the summer school programs that are running. We know that we are adding a preschool summer program this year in response to some of the needs that we have. And additionally, and I think it was referenced earlier, that some of our elementary schools are planning some 2-week camp situations for students, and transportation will be we'll look at what's available for transportation for those. And then finally, we'll be working with our summer literacy program to provide the transportation in that area. So I did get a question, and I'm not really exactly sure about the transportation guidance. I have reviewed the transportation guidance with the committee in the past. The new guidance is that the capacity limits are lifted for elementary and middle school, and that ridership is two students to a seat. That's what the guidance allows. That's what we are operating under. And so I know there had been some questions about that, but that guidance is also available on the DESE website, and I think it's also available on our own website through some links of my own. So.
So I think the questions are around previously, especially with the littler butts, we might put 3 in a seat. So we're not at our previous maximum capacity on a bus, or what we would consider maximum capacity, right?
Correct.
We're at like 48.
Correct.
instead of-
We are limiting to 2 seats, 2 to a seat.
No matter their
Correct.
size.
Yes, and so that's through middle school. And at high school, it's at a high school as well, but our high school capacity isn't quite as high because our runs aren't as full. So that's the information on transportation. And then I have some updated information on the budget and the budget process. So I'll just walk you through what I have, and please ask questions along the way as you go. I think all of you have a copy of the orange, I call it the orange sheet, Jean's famous orange sheet, which detailed some of the changes. And I also had the opportunity to speak with some of you throughout the week to answer any questions that you had. So please feel free to ask as I go through. As always, whenever we address the budget, the first thing we want to think about is making sure that our budget priorities align with what our spending in our goal areas are. And again, these are the updated goals. We reviewed these in the past couple of weeks. These are our new focus areas based upon the findings from our district improvement plan work and our equity audit. We always need to keep in mind the major factors that are impacting the FY22 budget. We will always have contractual obligations that shift from year to year. We have enrollment considerations that we want to keep in mind. And then the final 3 areas up here are areas, because we have the availability of ESSER funding this year and some additional funding to the schools, how can we address some of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic that we've all been experiencing? Just as a reminder, we're entering into negotiations, as Ms. Abel referenced earlier, with our BTA for our units A, B, and C. For our contract for the collective bargaining of the 22 to 24 contract, just so that you keep in mind and understand sort of a benchmark of the money and what it means. 1% of COLA would be a $468,000 increase, and 2% of COLA is $936,126. We know the actual numbers for steps. Steps are as each teacher progresses through the years, the increases that they receive. That comes to $521.45, as well as lanes, and lanes are the columns that teachers move over as they get further education. And so we know those numbers are numbers that we have to keep in mind as we build the budget. So I've gone through this list of requests with you over the past 2 weeks. However, all I've done now is shift some of the requests from either the appropriated budget to the ESSER grants or to some special education grants. Before we did that, Jean and I spent a lot of time making sure that whatever requests we made and we reallocated from appropriate to ESSER or staffing positions or expenses that we knew that we were not going to need in future years, so that we were not building a budget that would have a delta in coming years. So I'm not going to go through each one, but the major changes that we made, you'll see here. In our ESSER 2 grant funding, we shifted. We had previously 5 elementary teachers on the ESSER grant. We moved 2 more of those teachers over. We did that based on enrollment and where those positions lie and the need, that whether we would have a need for them in the coming years. We also made a couple of changes to a couple of other positions, shifting a special education position from the appropriated budget to one of the special ed grants. Taking a look at the bus monitors, we didn't eliminate any of these positions. We're still recommending that we have those positions. It's just the funding source that we're using in order to fund those positions. We didn't make any changes to our request for non-staff positions at this time. So that brings us to the summary, our appropriated budget, and I have the historical FY21. Our final budget appropriation was $63,285,805. Our current requests, FY22 department requests as of 4/28, we're asking that we have a city contribution this year of $54,785,493. We have a Chapter 70 money that is estimated from the House Ways and Means budget at this point in time of $10,590,914. So our draft budget request right now as of 4/28/21 is $65,376,407. Where are we in the legislative process? So we know that the governor's budget came in this is all for Chapter 70 funding, at $10,492,715. House Ways and Means has come through at $10,590,914. So that's an incremental increase for Beverly over last year's Chapter 70 money of $465,484. As soon as it goes through the Senate process, we'll have a final Chapter 70 number, and then we'll know exactly what that number is. In response to some of your questions last time, some people asked about enrollment numbers, and I think I can understand why. So I referenced earlier the shifting of 7 positions onto ESSER. Those are positions that we're adding. When we reviewed what we thought we might need to do in order to provide the services to the students in light of the situation that we have, what our proposed optimal class sizes would look like for the coming year, had sat with principals, had conversations about what we would need. We really wanted to focus our concentration on grades K to 3 while they're building those foundational reading skills. And so where you see highlighted bars, that's an additional position that we're adding based on the ESSER funding that's available. We typically may not be adding this position if we didn't have that funding, but since we do, we feel like this is a good use of our resources and a good way to address some of the needs that our students might have. So that's an additional grade 1 position at the Ayers School, an additional grade 2 at Centerville, an additional grade 4 at the Cove School, an additional grade 2 at the Hannah School. And then finally, we had 2 additional classes at North Beverly, one for grade 3 and one for grade 4. And if you look, that keeps our range of class sizes, purposefully low. That's a purposeful decision that we're making to have those lower size numbers for the coming year. You'll also notice that often the case, as I referenced, why we're able to move 2 of our positions that we had originally wanted unappropriated over, when we realized that if it's a grade 4 class, that grade 4 will be moving into the middle school next year, and so we would be revisiting what those numbers are. In many of our elementary schools, it varies. Some grades have 3 sections, some grades have 4 sections, so it's something that changes on an annual basis. So, any questions on the class size? Did I address the question? I think, Ms. Fisnick, you were one of the folks that had the question.
I think that it would be helpful if the community heard, if they look at a slide like this and they say, why would we have a kindergarten class size bigger than all of our older children? And so you and I had talked about that on the phone, but I think if you would
Yeah.
address
Yeah,
that
so-
so
so-
the community could hear. I
Right.
would
So
appreciate
there's
that.
there's two things. First of all, in all of our kindergarten classes, we have a full-time paraprofessional as well. So there are 2 adults in those classes already. But typically, so our kindergarten enrollments are still evolving, and we typically keep an eye and make sure that we have enrollments, and we would make changes and add based upon as students enroll. But the grade 1 and in particular, a grade that we have our eye on and that we have some concerns for, because many of the kindergarten, they didn't have a typical kindergarten experience already this year. And so we are 100% planning that the kindergarten students will have a very, hopefully, strong and typical kindergarten experience next year, whereas we're looking at kind of some recovery for some of those students that are going into first grade and making sure that we can address the needs as we go. So that's really the thinking behind that.
Thank you.
All righty. There were also some questions about the mental health services and social emotional learning, and questions about what does our staffing look like in our schools. So this addresses some of that. At the preschool and elementary, we have 6 FTEs of school adjustment counselors. What that is 1 counselor per school, as well as 1 counselor specifically for the SSP program. And we have additional contracted services that are available for students and families through the partnership that we have for the Home for Little Wanderers. That's primarily focused on the preschool level, but also available at the elementary level. So as needed, if there are services beyond what a school adjustment counselor can provide, that's one of the sources that we have that we can go to. Again, remember, additionally, in our elementary and pre-K through 12, we have BCBA. We have 4 BCBAs across the district that are able to go in and provide supports and understanding around programming. At the middle school, we have 6.6 FTEs of school adjustment counselors. There's 1 counselor assigned per grade, plus an additional 0.6 counselor that floats. There's a counselor assigned to the SSP program and a counselor that's assigned to the REACH program. And we also have additional contracted services that we have through Leahy Behavioral Health. And currently there are 4 counselors that we're utilizing at the middle school that we contract through the Leahy Behavioral Health. And then finally at the high school, there are 5 guidance counselors, and there are 4.5 school adjustment counselors, and there's an outreach counselor position. As many of you know, at the high school, our students are divided by last name, and then they are assigned a guidance counselor, and that guidance counselor stays with them through their 4 years of high school. Our school adjustment counselor services are available to anyone that needs them, either as they are referred, if they are required by IEP, if they are requested, and they also include services to our ladders in our Beacon program. Again, we have additional contracted services provided through the partnership with Leahy Behavioral Health, so those counselors are available to students at the high school as well. And we have an outreach counselor position at the high school for working with families and wraparound services. So that I wanted to just sort of lay that out. In our current budget, we are requesting an additional 0.5 school adjustment counselor at the high school and an additional outreach counselor at the middle school. So that's the staffing as it stands. As I said, and I think I mentioned it in many of our conversations, but one of the requirements of our ESSER funding that we're receiving is that we spend 20% of that funding on mental health and social emotional services. So while those are in addition, so those are our expenses that we would be looking to how we can best use that money. We've been meeting with administration at the high school, the middle school, and the elementary to talk about what that looks like and how to best meet the needs that they're seeing as they're having their students return more and having more opportunity to work with them. Again, anybody in our community, in our school community, any student, any family, parent of a student, if you have concerns or questions about your child's mental health or social emotional, please reach out to your building. The services are available. The services are there. We're able to provide them. So just reach out to someone in your school. Mr. Milady.
Mr. Milady.
Thank you very much. I think last meeting we asked, or I think I asked and another member said they're interested in what the counselor ratio is at the middle school.
So, so we have assigned 1 school adjustment counselor per grade. But we also have contracted services that are measured, and they're assigned as needed throughout the schools. So we don't have a specific number beyond that. And we have 2 counselors, but there are 6.6 FTEs. I mean, you could do a number plus the 4 that come from Leahy Behavioral Health divided by the 1,400. That's one way to do it, but it wouldn't be an exact number on caseload, so to speak, because not every student accesses in the same way.
Sorry, but would we be able to find out what the average caseload is for the counselors? And then another question I had is, I don't know what curriculum instruction subcommittee meeting we were at, but Vice Principal Twombly mentioned that this past year we've seen a record number of hospitalizations at the middle school. And, as chair, I'm going to fault myself for not asking, what that number is. But I think, that's an important thing to consider, and what we saw in terms of hospitalizations this past year and what we saw in the previous year.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask Ms. Splansky to help me with that, because I know that she had some numbers in terms of hospitalizations.
Thank you. I don't have specific numbers, but there certainly has been an increase at the middle school and high school level in terms of hospitalizations, although there's also been a limit to the hospitalizations that are available for students. So we've had some students who have been unable to be placed in programs that they typically would have access to, like partial hospitalization programs. Was there another?
So I also think, and I want to add, because I had this conversation with Mark Thomas just yesterday, that particularly around that access of those beds and access of those services. One of the things that we're very fortunate in our work with our PASS program that we have, I think that we have been very fortunate in being able to help more families access than we may have been able to in the past through some of the services and the wraparound services that they're doing. The PASS program particularly used to run as it truly was a alternative to suspension. So you'd have a behavioral issue and you may be assigned to the PASS program. This year, they've really shifted their focus to support families and to support students throughout the pandemic. And so they've shifted the focus of the work that they're doing. So some students are going there not because they have been, it's as an alternative to suspension, but also as an opportunity to receive some services and supports that they might not have been able to receive otherwise. So, in terms of I can certainly bring and supply you with the numbers, the exact numbers. I know Bethany can help us get those if you want them. And in terms of ratios, again, I can work and see what the principals have. Again, it varies because you might say, oh, it's 360 kids per school adjustment counselor because there's one school adjustment counselor assigned to each grade level. But that doesn't necessarily work because some of the students in a grade level may have a different association either with the Leahy Behavioral Health contracted service providers that we have, or with one of the school adjustment counselors accessing it through the REACH program or through SSP. So.
Right. The other thing, too, with services that are provided outside of the IEP process, they might be short term. So it might be that a student needs services for a period of time or needs check-ins or inconsistent kinds of support, but then is not requiring support for months at a time. So it's the consistent caseloads are students who have services either through an IEP or through a 504, but then there's a lot of general education support to students who need it at that time.
Right. And I think unlike at the high school where you have a guidance counselor and everyone has scheduled moments in time that they have to meet with their guidance counselor, that's not the same model that we have at the middle school. Our middle school model is more of an adjustment counselor service available as needed for students when they need it, at the level that they need it at that time.
Exactly.
I would just like to add, I actually joined the Be Healthy Beverly meeting this morning with Assistant Principal Thomas, and I think that the PASS program reference that you mentioned and our partnership with a number of organizations is really strong. The Gloucester City has a position that coordinates really closely with other districts, and I do think that Dr. Flaherty and I, as well as Mr. Thomas, have been invited to some of the initiatives that are being ramped up But in addition to that, they have added a navigator position, and they're enhancing that opportunity to help families wherever they live, not necessarily through the school, access the resources that they need. And an asset map is also being developed and is just about to launch to get people more access to the information they need to make choices about what services they would like to access. So
Yeah, thanks.
the Be Healthy Beverly typically meets
Early Wednesday morning. I know, very early on a Wednesday morning.
very early, and I will make sure that I provide information to all of the members so that you have the same information that I have access to right now as the person that's attending those meetings. So I'll make a note for myself just to make sure you have all those links, and you can share them freely with constituents as well. Lady, do you have additional questions?
I do. Mr. Robinson, I'm going to ask one more clarifying question, and I apologize for taking up all the airtime. I just want an understanding about what's the benefit of the contracted services with Leahy versus hiring somebody in person. So I'm just curious to see if I have a student in my class and they're getting their services through Leahy versus a colleague. What are the interactions that I'm going to have as a classroom teacher with Leahy in terms of helping provide for that specific student? And then who does that contracted service provider report to? Does it report to Ms. Blansky? Does it report to the middle school? Does it go to the students? I'm assuming they have an assigned guidance counselor.
So with the contracted services, those are generally services that would typically be provided outside of the school setting, through clinics and that kind of a thing. But it's difficult sometimes for families to access those services, because of parents working and that sort of a thing. So it's really bringing those outside clinical services into the school setting to provide them, within the context of the student's school day. So they're not overseen by our department in the same way that our own employees are overseen. They are part of the Leahy network, and they are overseen clinically by their supervisors. They do obviously work closely with our teachers and our school adjustment counselors and our guidance counselors to make sure that we're providing coordinated service and supports to students, but they really are working in a more clinical model just within the school setting.
I think I would add too, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but I know that we've had a lot of conversation and discussions about what kinds of therapeutic interventions are available in school and appropriate for in school, and what level of therapeutic interventions school adjustment counselors at different levels should engage in during a school day. So I think a lot of it has to do with it's an individual case basis and what's needed and what isn't needed and what can we provide in a healthy environment, and then return kids back to classroom, in a state that they can do that. So and again, can you just talk about the funding for the Leahy Behavioral Health?
So those are all funded through, for the most part, they're funded through grants that are separate from our grant funding. Mm-hmm. So it's not part of our special education grant funding. It's usually grants that are through Leahy. But just to go off of what you just said too about the level of need, students who are found to have educationally based needs, in other words, needs related to their disability that impact their access within the classroom, those are students who would be provided services with our own counseling staff through either an IEP or a 504. So many of the students who are serviced through Leahy, might be dealing with a variety of different stressors or, trauma-based issues or issues, family-based issues that are more of a kind of the clinical model. So that's sort of where the line is.
Ms. Robinson.
Thank you. I was just wondering if we're seeing fewer students in crisis now that restrictions are being lifted and people are generally feeling a little bit less isolated. If that, I think it's a good thing to look into to see how things are going.
I had a meeting recently with all the school counselors to kind of just get a sense of how things are looking for them and what their caseloads are like and what their needs are within their department. And, it's interesting. I think at the elementary level, they're seeing with kids coming back and with kids, having having the longer day and all that, they're feeling really positive about where things stand, and they're feeling like they've been able to provide more of the real tier 2 services that sometimes are really challenging to provide when you're, running around and doing lunch bunches and all that stuff. They've really been able to do some more targeted supports, and so they're feeling like students are in a good place. I think, the mental health needs look different at the middle school and high school level, just because of some of the developmental nature of what's going on at those age levels. But I think in terms of the hospitalizations and the more like that level of care, it seems like things are slowing down from where they were months ago. Yep.
And I also, I guess the one other thing, just so that there's some clarity too, the REACH program and the Beacon program, those are our programs that we have designed in those buildings to help students ease back into a school setting from hospitalizations. So that's one of the primary goals of those programs, so that if a student is in a hospitalization, that they have a return plan. How do we welcome them back into the school setting? How do we ease them back in? How do we support them as they need during that return time? So those programs are specifically targeted to address the needs of students who, may, and I believe they probably also reach, and I'm sure Mrs. Taylor can speak to it, but to try to prevent some hospitalizations too, right? So that we're really looking at that. That's the exact at-risk group of students that we're looking at in what we call the REACH program at the middle school and the Beacon program at the high school. And those are both programs that have been added within the last 2 years. So I think I referenced in the last meeting that we had recently increased. And so both of those programs had an added school adjustment counselor and an added either academic educator or a special educator, so that they're staffed with 2 adults in those programs, 2 adults in each of those programs.
Mr. Milady.
Thank you. So our last meeting, we had a presentation about the increasing number of students from Beverly who are interested in going to Essex North Shore. Mm-hmm. What role do the adjustment counselors or the guidance counselors play into that? And I guess what I'm getting at is we understand the need to help out our high school students in applying to colleges. We're putting in a position for that. We have the largest middle school in the state by population, but we have more counselors at the high school. And it just seems that on the bookend of the middle school, we have a massive transition year for 5th graders, where there's 1 adjustment counselor for a 5th grader. We have another transition coming up in 8th grade. So I'm just trying to get an understanding of what the workload is for some of these counselors in the 5th grade and one end, mm-hmm. and on the 8th grade. So it just seems like it must be very challenging to try to help these students in their application process as they're looking at high schools and different high schools, not just Essex North Shore, in addition to running around and doing their job on their day-to-day.
So there is a proposal in the budget for a director of college and career readiness, and our vision for that is to specifically look at supporting that transition for 7th and 8th graders for a couple of levels. One, to access to advanced coursework to make sure that we're positioning kids as they leave the high school, the middle school, and transition into the high school, so that they have an understanding and readiness for that. But also to specifically take a look at that North Shore Tech or any of our other programs to make sure that we're providing what we need. I think Mrs. Oliver has been working closely with Heidi Riccio and talking about some of the ideas. We've been working with her, digging into the data and trying to figure out what those are. I think that, we have proposed an additional position to kind of help with that. In terms of the transition of 4th into 5th grade, we have the caseload of that counselor for 5th graders. When you pull out any of the high needs kids that have their own counselors, we think that's adequate. I don't think we've heard that that's been a concern or an area of problem. I don't know, Mrs. Blansky, if you want to.
No, I think the actual caseload numbers in terms of students who have required services is pretty
low.
Pretty comparable. I think where sometimes it's a little bit more unpredictable is just the kind of the needs that come up that are unexpected or that are inconsistent. I know there can be times where there happen to be a bunch of students who have some unexpected needs, and those times can be trickier to manage. But in terms of the actual expected caseload demands, I think they're pretty comparable.
Do we have any more questions at the table? Ms. Coelho?
Thank you, Madam President. So I was trying to figure out how to word this where it might come out right. I'd like to piggyback on Mr. Merlady about some of his things. So for those who might not know, in the middle school, how many teams per grade are there?
So there are 7 teams in the 5th, 7 teams in the 6th, and then there are 3 neighborhoods in the 7th and 8th.
Okay. So for each one of those grades, there's only one counselor for all those students.
No, there's a multitude of ways in which students can access counseling, but there is a counselor, there is one counselor assigned to each grade level, but a multitude of options as to ways that students can access counseling or ways that they would be assigned counselor. So the counselor that's assigned to the 7th grade, for example, may also have, there are other programs in the 7th grade that have an additional counselor assigned to them. There are other mental health providers that come in from Blahey Behavioral Health to support students in those programs. So is that?
But most of them are for the children, like she had said, that have IEPs or 504s and stuff like that.
That's how services, that's only one way to acquire services. Services can come by request. Services can come because they are referred to us for services, and services can come because they're required as the result of an IEP.
Okay, so I don't know the name of all the counselors for each grade, so I do know Mr. English, so I'll just throw him out there as an example. So say there is a student that is having an off day, so they're up there, they're talking to Mr. English. And then there's 4 other children maybe in that grade that are just having an absolute wretched day and they need help, but they're not on one of those students that have an IEP or a 504 or any of that, and they need help that day. They're just having an absolute down day, and there's no one to help them because there's a long line of children waiting to get in.
I mean, I guess we could look day by day. I don't have a day by day report, and we can certainly try to bring you some information, but we're working very hard not to. There's not a number. Every day is different. Every student is different. The level of need that every student has is different. And so we certainly never tell anybody we can't help you because we don't have anyone. We would find someone that's available to help that person. There's a number of different ways to offer the supports and services that we have. We have, a lot of different options for students when they need supports. I'm not really sure. I guess I'm not really sure what it is that the outcome that you're asking me for, because I can bring back numbers and tell you how many students a typical counselor might see in a day. I could bring you information about the number of students who have accessed services. But services, range from, hey, let me walk you back to class and why don't you tell me how things are going, to, needing to spend 2 hours in one of our, areas for cooling down and for regathering yourself. So it's an individualized approach to how we're going to address the needs of students.
I guess maybe I'm just asking about, a counselor to be on hand for the children that aren't special needs, that aren't.
Those are the counselors that are assigned to the grade level. They're assigned to the grade level for students that aren't necessarily requiring particular services.
Have a maths program and an assistant principal for each grade too.
Yeah, well, that's what I just said. Yeah.
Right, so those counselors are to meet the needs of special education students and general education students who have counseling needs. So it's for all the students who have counseling needs. So the ones who have IEPs or 504s have required services that are scheduled as part of their programming. But as Dr. Trocheck said, any student who has an issue at any given time, on any given day, those students' needs are met by the counselors as well. And that's why I say there could be days where, like you said, a couple of different students are having a hard time, and I'm not going to say there's never a tricky day where counselors aren't spread thin. But for the most part, Their caseloads are a balance between the special education students whose services are, we know, in our scheduled ahead of time, and then the needs that come up within the building on any given day. And, the needs might be met by a counselor, but they might be met by other staff members too, including the teachers and including the special education teachers.
We have 4
including-
assistant principals in the middle school right now. So, what the role needs and what responses are needed are provided by whatever personnel is necessary to do that.
I saw Mr. Milady's hand.
I think that what you said, Ms. Belansky, is like, that's exactly my point. It's like, we shouldn't be at the level where our counselors should be spread thin. If our counselors are being spread thin, then there's a problem. And I think that you made a very fair point, that some days it's going to be harder than others. But we know that at any given point, you could have 2 assistant principals trying to, help out a student, which means that they're not going to be doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. Maybe they're, or not, I don't want to say supposed to, but maybe the job they intended to do that day, because life happens. But if our counselors are being spread thin, it's problematic. And I think I'm a little upset that we had a record number of hospitalizations, but that number isn't known offhand. If we had a record number of hospitalizations at a restaurant or any sort of other facility in the city, we would know that number right off the bat.
Well, it's not that we don't have it. We don't have it with us at the meeting tonight.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, we should know.
You wanna know-
I'm just a little upset that that number isn't known off the top.
So, well, I apologize for that. We'll have to dig that number up for you.
If I sound like I'm being condescending, I apologize. It's just alarming. That's all. That we had this, and I guess I'm more mad at myself for not asking the follow-up question. But we know that we're hitting a level where problems that have existed are coming into light more.
But I don't mean to
Sure.
interrupt, but I
Well,
did mention.
But Sue, you are. I'm almost done. I'm
Okay.
almost done. The number of students per counselor ratio, we need that number. It's important for us, and it'll help us make the decision going forward. We know that your team is putting together the budget that is supposed to be the best that we can do. And I think that the fact that we're asking these questions, I know we might be coming off as like, or sometimes I do, as being like inconsiderate or rude, and I apologize. That's not my intent. But it's just that we care. And we have a committee that wants to help, and we're talking about adding more positions and not taking away positions. So it's coming from a place of love, so I apologize for my tone and for my
So
manner.
I guess I just want to remind you that we have ESSER funding, of which we need to spend 20% on mental health services. And so this isn't that those services, in response to the high number of hospitalizations that you're referring to, are services that we are going to be able to add to when we determine what the proper services will be for those students. And we're doing that, assessing on an ongoing basis. We have plans to do a survey, to do some more distinct ACEs check-ins for students, but those all require parent permission. They require us to have a need and a reason to do them. So that's what we're doing. We've only had our middle school students back in full in person for 8 days. We have our high school students only 2/3 for half a day. We're working very closely, but we certainly are entertaining and working with any family that reaches out to us for services. And I'm not saying that we don't intend to support and provide supports wherever we need them, but we spent 2 hours yesterday in a leadership meeting talking about what exactly would those right supports look like. Because maybe it's not necessarily a school adjustment counselor sitting in an office all day waiting for students to need them, but some more proactive services around outreach, maybe doubling the outreach services that we have, providing wraparound services, connecting families with community services, or looking for ways to provide and strengthen our access to hospitalizations if they're necessary. How do we support families? Our elementary principals mentioned the need for more social work supports that are more family-oriented. And so we're trying to assess exactly what we need and how we need it, and we've reached out to the administrative team to tell us that. We know we have funding available via ESSER, and ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and coming ESSER 3. So it's not a lack of funding that we have. It doesn't really impact the questions that I have for this budget. It's really a matter of what do we want to do and how do we get what we need for our students and our families for the traumas that they're facing at this time. I don't know if that addresses. And I 100% understand your passion, because I sit up here with the same level of passion, right? So, I always take the opportunity to share that our administrators and our teachers in our buildings are working really hard to help identify exactly how to support and how to help someone. So I'm probably guilty of the same thing. And I have the numbers on hospitalizations. We had 22 hospitalizations, and that's up 8 from last year, up from about 8 last year. So that number is available. Thank you.
I'll call myself real quickly then, Ms. Visnick. Open meeting laws prevent us from having outside conversations and discussions, and it's incumbent upon each of us to reach out to the superintendent with our concerns. And I would say that Dr. Churchuk and I have had some conversations in this area, and I understand that it is as passionate an area for her as well as our elementary school principals. And I would just encourage anyone, when we do have questions or when we do want to have some of those tough conversations, Dr. Churchuk works for all of us equally, and we all can have those conversations and ask those questions. So I think that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution for our students and our families, and I'm really looking forward to the creativity of our leadership teams across the buildings to figure out what's going to work best, and we just need to be ready to be able to support that. And certainly the ESSER funding is going to give us a little bit more flexibility than we usually have, but we do need to be mindful of the fact that ESSER funding is for a couple of years, and we really need to make sure that we stick to our convictions in our budgeting process. Ms. Visnick.
Thank you. I think that I too had some conversations with Dr. Churchuk about counseling and the mental health plan, and I've said things at previous meetings about, we can't just open the doors and expect that that'll just magically solve all the problems. I think that there's like on a visual level, we look at this budget, and we've talked before as a group about how our budget reflects our values. And so if everyone in this room is concerned, and rightfully so, and we heard so many parents contact us and say, please open the doors, let our children back in, our children are struggling. And then we see, from 8 up to 22, that's a huge jump. So it seems like, again, on the very surface, the very top of what we can see visually, that this budget then is not matching our values of doing the right thing. I say it seems like that, and a lot of things are not what they seem. So the fact that there is money waiting to be spent, that we have ESSER funds, the fact that there are evaluations happening right now trying to decide what is the best plan. The fact that Dr. Churchuk, as you shared with me yesterday, the infamous they say, I don't know who the they are, but some number of experts estimate that on the order of 85% of children will be back to normal if we just open the doors. And so the conversations that Dr. Churchuk and I had yesterday, I think it was yesterday, were around, well, what about that other 15%? And how do we figure out what those 15% need? And I guess for the last couple of meetings, I think I have been in a different chair, in a different space, and I think I now look at it like, okay, why hire, I maybe I'm trying to say I can see both sides of it. I can see somebody looking at this budget and saying this is supposed to reflect our values and we want to have more counselors, but I can also look at it and say, okay, we're trying to be much more dynamic in what we do versus saying, okay, we're going to hire X number of additional counselors. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think we've talked very much about that. And so maybe, again, on the visual level, what we talk about is what we see here. We're not talking about those evaluations and those longer term plans. And so maybe we just need to have more conversations about what are we doing specifically for the 15%, or maybe it's more than 15%, Or in my mind, I think that there is a group that is not known, and we don't know what we don't know. So how are we trying to find out those children? Certainly we know the children who have been hospitalized. Certainly we know the children who have been absent. And we have to send the outreach counselors to do home visits. But there's probably a whole group of other children that need help. And so what are we doing for those children? And maybe this budget meeting is not the place to have that conversation, but maybe it is, because if we need money, if we need resources to go help those children, then this absolutely is the right place to have the conversation.
Mr. Milady.
So, because of confidentiality and the sensitive nature, I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session.
No, I'm not sure that we can go into executive session without having that posted for a reason. Under Mass General Law, you have to have a reason.
Then I will withdraw or table that. There we go.
Ms. Robinson.
Sorry. I just want to say I appreciate the passion that everybody brings to this conversation. And I definitely think it's important for us to consider and look into where those hospitalizations stemmed from. Was it from isolation? Was it from academic, the anxiety that came with just having a lot of academics to do on your own? Did somebody lose somebody important to them because of COVID? I just think there's so many places where things could have come from. And I just think it's important that we assess it and then figure it out and then decide where to spend that 20%. Really, that's all, but I just think it's important to really look at where all this came from and take it from there.
Dr. McKenzie.
All right, thank you. I just had a question about scaling up and the possibility to look at what we have now, but be able to be flexible should we get more of a needs assessment done. Because my concern is that the time it will take to do a needs assessment and a deep dive into what all the scenarios are might be longer than this budget process will take. So when I see additional contracted services, I'm wondering if that is the place where there's some flexibility to scale up if we find that that is necessary, or if those are fixed numbers.
So I guess I think I have to apologize. I may not be being clear. So there is $2.1 million of ESSER funding available over a 2-year period of time. It's a requirement that we spend 20% of that ESSER funding on mental health and social emotional services. So in terms of scaling up, I think I will say that our plan before the end of the year, and that was the discussion and conversation, we're looking for the exact tool. We've looked at a couple of different tools. There's a LEAP tool. There's a panorama survey that we can administer. We're looking for the right tool to administer to sort of figure out how can we collect some data and identify where there is a need, and then take where we identify that need and do some more deeper work with either an ACEs screening or something like that to determine what the right response to that need is. So the response, where the trauma comes from and the type of trauma that it is going to vary. If it's a situation where a student really just became overly anxious and overwhelmed by lack of executive functioning skills because they were in a situation that they hadn't done before, it's a different response than if it was a grief and loss type of counseling that they require, or whether it is this social isolation has had it, and how do we, what do we need to do in that way? So our goal is to determine what are the right responses and then spend the money accordingly. So using the remainder of this year to do those assessments and to sort of gather feedback from students and identify what the needs are, and then make some purposeful decisions about how we utilize the funding that isn't part of this budget process because it's available through the ESSER grants, right? So it wouldn't impact the budget that we're trying to propose here tonight. It would be funding that we would access from a different source. And so that's sort of, and so the timeline that we have set for ourselves is sort of over the course of the next 7 weeks that we have left. And as we get students back in, being able to sort of administer some of these and gather some of that information, then take the summer and over the summer do some planning so that when we come back to school, or maybe even it's summer services that we're going to provide, that we can also use ESSER money to access to be able to do some of that. So,
Thanks. I want to follow up with that by thanking you for clarifying, because I think I was concerned that with this particular layout, that would you, sort of essentially, should you find the need to be different, that we would be stuck with this model, but it doesn't sound
this
like
is
that.
just the base. So this is sort of the baseline of what
Okay.
services look like outside. So I kind of, in creating the budget, I had to think about it two ways. First of all, pretend there was no pandemic and pretend we were going back to school. What would the appropriated budget need to look like if we didn't have this pandemic and we were opening as a typical school? Because hopefully by FY24, we're back in a world where we're back to a typical budget. And we don't want to leave ourselves short. We want to make sure that the increases that are natural that would have occurred over the next two budget seasons are incorporated into the appropriated budget so we don't sort of have a delta when we get to FY24. But by the same token, we have some wonderful funding that's available to us to address the needs that come up as the result of the pandemic. So recovery and renewal around academic learning loss, taking a look at social emotional needs that occur as we go, taking a look at ways to support families that have suffered in traumas or in different ways. So that's why I have it divided into an appropriated budget and then funding that we're pushing off onto the ESSER.
Thank you.
Do you have some more slides?
I don't know. I hope not. No, I'm kidding. Oh, yes, I do. So that was, I can stop there, though. That particular portion was about the budget. I don't know if you need to stop and if you were going to take a motion for Jean, because at this point, if you approve the budget as I've created it here, Jean will move forward and create the budget documents so that they can we have to have them made public. I don't know, 7 days prior to the public hearing?
Yes, I was actually just sitting here typing up the ad because I have to do that next week. So one question I'm going to have is it going to be just a remote meeting? Sorry, just a remote meeting on Zoom, or is it going to be hybrid? So that's another thing is, last year we had a totally remote meeting on Zoom.
She's meaning the public
Yeah,
hearing.
it will be a hybrid meeting. We'll be here in person. We will try to make public access available, if socially distanced, public
Yeah.
access, and we will be hybrid, so people may join via Zoom. So it'll be hybrid, and I will get you the link.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. We're not here to approve the budget, but we do need to give the superintendent the thumbs up for the recommended budget that's before us this evening. This would be the opportunity for members, if they had any concerns with the budget as it's been outlined and described, before Ms. Sherburne makes that publicly available. We should discuss that now before, I don't know.
Besides counseling, I have one more question.
One more question for Ms. Bisnick. Okay, we'll do another question.
I'm wondering if there has been any, as we just explained, we've had conversations. I wonder if there has been any conversation in between the mayor's office and the sustainability director around the schools and the initiatives in them that are green related, very specifically composting in our cafeterias, assuming that we get to go back to something closer to normal. We know that in order for us to compost, there's an additional cost there, and I don't see anything in this new budget to try to do that. But has there even been any conversations around that?
Yeah, so there was actually, we had a discussion yesterday around not only more importantly, the recycling costs that the city is anticipating some work that needs to be done around their contract with the recycling companies, right? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, our
Right.
contract's up for renewal.
Yeah, and so, Jean and Brian and the mayor and I had that conversation around it. Would that impact the schools? We looked at what percentages the schools are assessed based upon what the city's assessed. And so Jean was confident that we had that covered within the budget. We did not specifically talk about composting, but we were, talking about some of those things, So no, we did not talk about composting, but yes, we did talk about some of the other initiatives, recycling and trash and some of those things.
Okay, I understand that we have a cost. I'm saying that we would have probably an additional cost if we did the right thing and we're more green and composted. So at some point in time, I would like this body to have that conversation and say, are we going to do that, especially given the city's priorities, and especially given that the JRM expenses are going to go up tremendously. Well, they're expected to go up significantly, I should say. So the more we can reduce our waste, the better off it is on multiple different levels.
Yeah.
But if we don't make an explicit plan to do that, it won't happen. We've seen time and time again that any given school has started an initiative and somebody out of the goodness of their heart has paid to do that composting, and then it ends.
Mayor Cahill.
Okay. You like how? So we know that we will avoid costs for tonnage not brought to the incinerator, right? We'll avoid tipping fees. And we certainly are investigating how to scale composting. So let's take that one from tonight.
That's two. You only have one left.
What do you mean?
You gave me an action item that you and I have to meet earlier, so.
Yeah, I know.
I'm teasing you.
That's
Yeah,
true.
no, so but it's a great point, and, we, in our negotiations to try to, strike a new contract for waste recycling and hopefully more and more composting hauling, we're looking at how to try to make that happen in more ways than the current, successful but ceilinged curbside composting that goes on today. And we absolutely are on the same page in wanting to see food composting in all of our schools and other things having to do with food, right? Avoidance of composting. There are a number of things that you would hope to do before getting to composting, but let's see how much clarity we can get on that between now and May 12th. That certainly help us to know better on those points by then. So, making a note.
Okay, did members have any additional questions before we make a motion to ask our Director of Finance to prepare the budget documents for publication? I don't see any more questions.
I would make that motion, Madam President.
Thank you, Ms. Bisnick. So as presented, a motion to direct our Finance Director to prepare the budget documents she normally prepares with this information. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
I saw Dr. McKenzie making a motion, or a second there, so Ken Ann McKenzie with a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Thank you, Ms. Sherburne, for getting that document prepared and published, as well as the advertisement. I owe you a link. I'll do it when I get home tonight. Okay.
All right, so now I'll move on to the next slide. So the next topic for discussion is the return to full in-person at the high school. So the Board of Ed, the State Board of Ed has voted that all districts are required to transition to full in-person instruction by May 17th. So that leaves the committee a couple of options. This committee may vote to return earlier. My recommendation a couple of weeks ago were to ask you to consider May 13th as a required return date, as a return date for high school students to full in-person instruction. However, you may either vote to do it on the 17th, or if there is no vote, the students would still be required to return to full in-person instruction by May 17th. So the commissioner has issued guidance that requires students in grades 9 to 12 to use a full-time in-person learning model for instruction hours to count towards structured learning time. That's sort of how they use the language within the regulation to make it a regulation. My recommendation is that whether it's May 13th or May 17th, the students will remain in their 2/3 hybrid model until that date, we have MCAS testing on May 4th and 5th and May 11th and 12th. And so we have determined that students will be remote. Freshman students and juniors not taking MCAS will remain remote for the mornings of those dates so that the testing can take place in the high school. It will be a full day. Students that are testing will go home and log on and finish the remote part of their day at home at the end of the day. So that's why I picked the 13th, because the disruptions of the 4th and the 5th and the 11th and 12th would be, a number of asking students to pivot quite often. So I think the case that's before you right now is either a decision to vote to return on May 13th, or you can simply wait and have the students just return on May 17th, or any other option that anyone might have.
Do any members have questions for Dr. Trocheck before we entertain a motion? I don't see any questions. The mayor, sorry, Mayor Cahill.
Thanks, Madam President. Can I ask, it seems intuitively that a benefit of the 13th, so it's 2 days, the Thursday and Friday, that a benefit of the 13th is for the kids who would have been remote on the 11th and 12th, we ensure they're not remote again on one of those days.
That was the thinking when we picked the 13th.
Okay, all right. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. I'll make a motion if nobody else wants to ask or say anything.
Go for it.
I'll move that we return, that we go to the full in-person instruction on May 13th.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to return our high school students on the 13th of May to full day, full in person. Ms. Visick. Is it open for discussion? Discussion is open.
All right, I mentioned when we were debating about whether to return our middle schoolers that this we have to return is something that I very much struggled with, and I talked to Dr. Trocheck about it at great lengths yesterday, but I wish to share here with this body that this will be either our 7th or our 8th change for our high schoolers for their schedule. And we know, well, hopefully everybody in this room knows, but educators certainly know, based on years and years of study, that transitions for children are not optimal. Our students have been, and our staff have been, incredibly resilient and flexible. But our high schoolers started the year remote 84-minute classes. Then they went to 1/3 hybrid, where when you were at home, it was asynchronous. You just did, you checked in for attendance and then you got kicked out of the Zoom. Then they went back to fully remote 84-minute long classes. Oh, and when they're in the 1/3 hybrid, their classes are only 50 minutes. Then they went back to 84 minutes. Then they went back to hybrid with 50-minute classes and 4 classes in the afternoon. Then we changed to something a little different because of time on learning. Then we changed to 2/3, and we changed what we were doing in the afternoon from 4 classes in the afternoon to 2 classes in the afternoon. And now we're going to change again with only 24 days left in the school year. And I really seriously wonder, is this what's best for children? And every single vote that I try to take, that is my guiding principle. And I have been trying to ask people who are educators, who work with children, how disruptive is it for these children to change yet again, and what benefit will come from 24 additional days? And I'll remind this body that approximately, I don't know, a month ago, we had the middle school principal here, and we actually made a vote. And then after we made our vote, she said, please reconsider your vote, because you're asking my staff and my children and their families to change, and then a month later to change again. And so I understand and appreciate that different people don't think as wildly and outside of the box as I do. I understand that some people feel that we have to comply, but I'm going to say again, we do not have to comply. And what we should be deciding on is what's best for children. And I don't believe that somebody sitting in the State House knows what's best for our children based on what we have done all year long. And I'm not sure that I know what's best for children because I don't have any data. I have one piece of data. which is my own son. But we don't have, we could have asked the climate committee. We could have asked the whole student body, the 9, 10, 11s. We could have asked their staff. We could have asked their families. And we haven't asked any of that. And we're just saying, okay, we're going to blindly comply. And in fact, what we try to teach our children to do is not that. We try to teach our children to be thinkers, to be critical thinkers, to analyze the data and consider their sources. And I have said this to this committee before. We, as the committee, whether we like it or not, people are looking at us, everybody's watching, and we need to model the behavior that we want our children to exhibit. So I can't support us going back without knowing some data, without having educational experts tell me, not Charlie Baker, not Commissioner Riley, an educational expert tell me that the 8th change for my high school student won't be more disruptive for a mere 24 days than it's worth. I'm done, thank you.
Are there other members that want to have discussion? We have a motion on the table to return full in-person, full-day learning for Beverly High School students on May 13th. Mayor Cahill?
I don't want to just go to vote without commenting, because Ms. Visiting, I want to validate, you probably don't need me to validate, but, a lot of what you said is very, very appreciated. And so it didn't feel right to just go to a vote off of that. So thank you for what you shared. And I think we probably all share all those concerns about the many iterations of learning that we've seen since September. I guess the one thing that has me nonetheless comfortable with voting to make this one more change is that this is the change that brings back what they've known all through their career, right? So, and I think this is the change that so many people have been wanting and hoping for and waiting for and hoping could come. So I guess that's how I look at it, and I'm able to feel good about what's in front of us. So thanks.
Mr. Mulady?
So I also want to comment, so thank you, Mayor Cahill, for opening up that window so we didn't go straight to a vote. I can say from my own experience in a much smaller district that I think you like this term, my anecdata is I've seen some benefits of my students who've come back to the room. And I think exactly what you're posing, I saw earlier today, Boston.com is posing the same question to others. So I'm voting yes because I've seen in my own little bubble some benefits this has had on some students, and I've had some students that this was the first time, because I teach primarily freshmen, that they were ever in the high school. So just seeing that reaction was also very welcoming. I came across this term in the NEA Weekly magazine about toxic positivity, and I want to say, I don't think this body is guilty of that with this particular vote, in terms of saying, oh, we're going to put the kids in, everything's going to be better, and positive vibes only. I think we're acknowledging that it's going to be a challenge, and I think putting the number of how many transitions our staff and our kids have gone through, it's a value to it. But I also think that this one final transition is going to have benefits for some kids.
Call myself as well. Thank you, Ms. Visnick, for sharing, and Mayor Cahill, again, for opening the conversation. I see the 24 days as being our opportunity, as Dr. Churchick talked about, some of the planning that we need to do for the summer and fall for our students. I think, whether it's the 13th or the 17th, getting students back in full time is really important for us. I think at the beginning or the outset, I talked about rigid flexibility, and you've mentioned resiliency. We need to have resilient students, we need to have a resilient community, and we need to return, to normalcy. And I think giving these 24 days at the end of this year before we go into the summer and we sort of most of our students for the summer. I think it's really valuable for our students and staff to reconnect. I think that there's an immense value to getting back to some normalcy, and so I also would support the slightly earlier return than the commissioner has and the DESE has required. It is only 24 days, but I think it's a very valuable 24 days for our students and staff.
Can I? So I just, because we finished this, we had this conversation, and I spent a lot of time thinking, and I actually want to thank you for laying out all of the different changes that we had to make, because I think one of the things that I really would like everyone to understand, and particularly to share, that those changes, each and every one of them, came as the result of reflection and a decision how to strengthen instruction for kids. So none of us knew how to do a pandemic when we went into this, right? There was no roadmap. There was no list that said, here's the optimal student schedule for high school students. And our teachers at our high school, who have been throughout this entire situation, willing and able to pivot and to reflect upon what works. Some of the small changes that you mentioned, whether we went from 4 classes in the afternoon to 2, or when we went remote during the 10 days and implemented the 84-minute schedule during the winter break, when we extended the winter break, those were decisions that were made because there were educators on the back end of that said, this is how it would work best for our students. And so we worked together with the teachers and with the administration. And I can't, it's almost, I'm kind of in awe at the number of times we pivoted and changed, right, throughout the course of the year. But each time we did it, it was done to improve instruction. And I think the one largest, most significant opportunity was when the union and worked together with administration, and we opened up live streaming for students. And I think, and that is not easy. And so 100% we need to commend our teachers for doing that. That concurrent teaching is really difficult, but they will tell you that it was an important instrument, I think, that made instruction better for everyone. So all of those changes really were made every single time in an effort to improve instruction. That was it wasn't as if we were just nilly-willy, pulling schedules out of the air. And really it is the teachers that were, very instrumental in how we got there. So I actually want to thank you. I hadn't really spent the time to think of how many times did we pivot throughout the year. So, and let's hope that we pivot back and that we're back on track, because it's really important.
Ms. Bisnick?
So I don't mean to disparage anybody, and I think that you're right, the reflections, or even the holiday, right? Many parents talked to me about that, and I think we talked about that at a meeting, and then you brought it forward, which is, I think was the right thing to do to protect our community. I'm not trying to say that any one of those changes was bad or ill thought out. I'm not opposed to a 5-day return. It's just changing their schedule to say you're going from 50 minutes in the morning and then 2 sessions in the afternoon. It's not about the days of the week that you get to come here. Mr. Milady, when you said you had a freshman who got to be in the building for the first time, that's not our situation, right? And so, again, I think Dr. Chirichik, you said any given one of those changes was because our educators reflected upon it and said, we need to do this. This isn't that situation. This is a situation where the Commissioner of Ed is saying, on this random day where I maybe threw a dart at the dartboard, everybody has to be back. And it's just a one-size-fits-all, and we're not a one-size-fits-all. And so my argument is as much, if not more, against the one-size-fits-all state mandate as it is as a parent of a child who has already changed 7 times this year, as you know, and my child is actually not my only data point. But like I said, we're following an edict from the state versus involving our direct frontline stakeholders. And when I say that is because we didn't actually ask any of them. That's all. I move the question.
Okay, well, the question has informally been moved, and or, do you have a question, Ms. Robinson? You have a comment?
I'll withdraw if Ms. Robinson
Okay.
wishes to speak.
Okay.
Oh, I just had a comment, and I just wanted to thank you for your impassioned speech. I thought that was, it really summed up a lot of what everybody's been thinking, what we've been doing for the past year. And, I mean, it's clear I've been voting on the side of, you know, let's hold them back. And now I'm looking at it and you know, I keep hearing from kids how much more normal it would be when we're all back in. And, you know, and when I drive by 40 Field, named after my wonderful 90-something-year-old neighbor, and I see lacrosse out there, I see track out there, I see baseball out there, and I just see more normalcy, and I see 16-year-olds being able to be vaccinated. Teachers are almost, I think everybody who wants to be vaccinated is there or getting there. And these are the changes that we were all hoping for to make things back to normal. And I'd like to see that happen before the end of the school year. But I respect and appreciate everything you just said.
We're ready to vote, and all those in favor of the motion before us to return our high school students. Okay, I think that we're ready for a vote. I'm sorry I didn't have my microphone on. I had been leaving it on so I wouldn't forget. We have a motion before us to return our high school students full day in person on May 13th. All those in favor? I'm counting 5 at the table. Those who are opposed? I'm counting 2. The motion has passed by a vote of 5-2.
Thank you. And I know Mrs. Taylor is here, so she'll take it from there. I know the high school is prepared and ready to go, so thank you. I get my final update, and I thought I would have more information for you on the opportunity for remote MCAS administration. We know that we are going to be able to offer remote MCAS administration for our families who are in the Remote Learning Academy in grades 3 through 8. We thought we would have more information at the webinars tomorrow. So we'll find out more about how we do that. But we know that we will be doing it, and it will involve some work with our technology department. So that is, again, that's just grades 3 through 8, and it's just families who are have committed to the RLA for the remainder of the year. So that was all I had.
Okay, so if our committee members could look at their calendars, we do need to set a meeting for voting on the budget. Typically, we would not do that in our regular school committee meeting because it is the same night as our public hearing, and we'd like opportunity to reflect on the presented information. Our F&F meeting is scheduled for the 19th. We would have the option to post a committee of the whole prior to that meeting, since half of our committee will be here for that meeting already, if we believe that the discussion and vote would be shorter, or we have an option to stack the meetings as we had done tonight, or possibly we could pick a different night, depending on people's schedules. Tuesday, the 18th shouldn't conflict with any scheduled city council meetings, or Thursday, the 20th. Is there a preference? Should we?
I have a conflict on Tuesday, the 18th.
Okay. Okay. So.
I usually work till 6 on Thursdays.
Okay, so the 19th might be the preferred day. Would we want to have our committee of the whole meeting briefly prior to F&F? 6:30?
Assuming that date works for everyone.
Does that date work for everyone? Mayor Cahill, you need to check.
I'm wondering if we might know better on the 12th as to whether the discussion will be briefer or more
robust.
Yeah, yeah. But maybe we will, maybe we won't.
Okay, so let's-
Maybe the safer thing is to just say 7:30.
We can stack. I can go to 7:30. I can go to 6:30 start.
6:30 to 7:30 for
For
FNF?
FNF.
That's not going to shortchange you?
Madam Bean Counter, Queen of the Beans. Did we pick a speaker for next month yet?
No, we did not.
We actually finished tonight early. I'm okay.
I think we'll be okay with that, and if we want to have Buildings and Grounds, we can have them come in our June meeting.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if we were, the only other people we were thinking of at one time would be Technology, and I don't think I'm going to have time to work with them before the May
Okay,
meeting,
so I would say that FNF would be happy to move up to, FNFers. Would you be happy to move to 6:30 that night so we can put the real committee behind us? Does that give you enough time to get here? Okay.
And I will work with the superintendent. If we have any other agenda items that we need to put onto that agenda, we'll take care of them so that we can hopefully cancel our meeting for the 26th. This would be replacing the May 26th Committee of the Whole. Okay, so everyone mark our calendars. Thank you. That brings us to the end of our agenda this evening. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Bisnick. Thank you, Ms. Coelho. All those in favor? Thank you, BevCam, as always, for recording us and broadcasting us. Appreciate it.
Kim.